Good evening and welcome to the regular council meeting for December 1st, 2021. And we are beginning at 6:03 p.m. And I now call to order this meeting. And at this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors for tonight's agenda? Seeing none, anything from administration? Then at this point, we just need a motion to confirm the agenda as presented.
I would so move that we confirm the agenda of December the 1st, 2021, Your Worship.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We have no presentations or recognitions tonight, but we are happy to welcome Mr. Bruce Kleiber tonight, who is our delegation to present on the Legacy Farms ASP. So if you wouldn't mind coming to the microphone, and it's good to see you. We haven't seen you in a while. I guess we haven't seen a lot of people in a while, but welcome this evening. And just before you start, Mr. Kleiber, I'll just remind you, you have a 10-minute presentation time, but then there will be questions and comments from councillors. So just the presentation part is the only thing. Thank you.
Okay, I will try and be quick with this. My presentation tonight, I hope that it makes council as excited as it has made me and a lot of other people in the town and the county, whatever, and want to support a project that we're proposing to go forward. So, Megan, how do I?
Mr. Kleiber, too, if you're comfortable at the podium and you'd like to remove your mask,
If I could, that would be
I think
great.
that'd be great.
Okay.
Then
super.
the public can hear you as well.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay. We got that? No, there's nothing yet. So a question that might be sort of central to my presentation tonight is asking a question, why were the projects carried out here by the Canadian Pacific Railway 100 and so years ago, why were they important? The irrigation project and the demonstration farm project. And so that's kind of a central question to my presentation tonight. And no, we still don't have anything up there. I have 8 slides that I'd like to run through and then open for questions afterwards. Oh, all right, there we go. All right. Okay, Canadian Pacific Railway Demonstration and Supply Farm. So I'd like to take you back to 1881. In 1881, the Canadian Pacific Railway was formed, and they were formed with a mandate to take a lay track from Winnipeg to Vancouver. And this was sort of what they were looking at, because in 1860, just 20 years before, a gentleman by the name of Palliser had filed a report saying that there was a large desert between Winnipeg and Calgary, and derived the name of the Palliser Triangle. So the Canadian Pacific Railway had chosen a route between Winnipeg and Vancouver, and that route was to go from Winnipeg to Saskatoon to Edmonton to then on into BC and down to Vancouver. And by looking at this map, you can see that in the area that is red, close to the border, that's a very light soil zone. Sorry, let me see, how do we go back here? How do I? You can hit the P button. Oh, okay, great, thank you. And as you went north from the red zone, the soil became more dark, and the yellow shows a black soil zone. So they thought that that was probably the best place to put a railroad track, because it would be attractive, the black soil would be more attractive to farmers and settlers than what Palliser decided was a desert would be. The desert area wasn't used much for other than pasture. And there were some American interests that were involved in pasturing cattle in that area at the time. So the Canadian Pacific Railway was ready to start, and the federal government came along and they said, well, yeah, we know you've chosen a route, but we really like you to stay kind of close to that 49th parallel, okay? Because there's a very large area below where you're wanting to put the track, and we don't want American interests coming in and claiming that, okay? So if you stay close. The CPR, first of all, rejected that option. They said, well, the big problem is the Palliser Triangle. It's deemed a desert, and it doesn't pay to put track across a desert because you don't have many customers. You have very few customers. As discussions continued, someone made the suggestion, they said, well, lots of water in the Bow River. If you irrigate that desert, you'll have intensive agriculture, and it will give you a lot of customers and a lot of reason, a lot of trips for your freight on your railway. And so an agreement was struck between the federal government and the Canadian Pacific Railway, whereby Canadian Pacific Railway would change the route. They wouldn't go from Winnipeg to Edmonton, they'd go from Winnipeg to Calgary, across the Palliser Triangle, and they would also build 3 irrigation districts. And there you see the 3 irrigation districts: the western section, central section, and the eastern section, which is what they were named at the start. In return, the federal government would grant them 3 million acres between Medicine Hat and Calgary, primarily where the 3 irrigation sections were. And so the beginning of the project, and I'll just back up just for a second, when that decision was made, everything was going to rest on the irrigation projects. In other words, the success of the Canadian Pacific Railway, because they were putting track across the desert, and also the settlement of Alberta, southern Alberta, the prairies, and indeed the rest of Manitoba too. So the Canadian Pacific Railway decided that the western section would be the first irrigation district that they started on. And when this project was announced, it was the largest irrigation project in the world at the time. So it was very important as well. So they started on the western section in 1903. They established their headquarters in Strathmore in about 1905, 1906. Took them a couple of years to go from Calgary to Strathmore. The project was by and large completed by 1910. And so they completed the irrigation district, and they didn't have heavy equipment to use. They did it with horses and equipment that the horses pulled. Along the way, when settlers started moving in, they determined that very few of them had agricultural experience, and even fewer irrigation and agricultural experience. So they said, what we need to do is build a demonstration farm so that we can show and sell pedigreed livestock and seed to these newcomers and help them succeed in the new ventures. And so again, they decided that Strathmore was the ideal place to build that farm. And they did build it. And that farm became world famous, or maybe not famous, but noted, that's for sure, over a period of time because of what the programs and the production that was experienced on the farm. For example, at one time, the demonstration farm had the largest dairy herd in North America if you didn't aggregate the carnation dairies spread across the United States. Average milk production for a milk cow in the early 1900s was 4,000 to 5,000 pounds per year. The average at the Strathmore farm was 13,000 pounds. And they had actually more than one, but I'll list one cow. Her name was Sylvia, and she produced over 29,000 pounds of milk in 1 year. So noted was the dairy production here that the nation of Japan entered into a contract with the Strathmore farm, whereby the Strathmore farm exported dairy cattle on an annual basis to Japan to help that country establish a dairy industry. So it was very, very important what was done here. As well as the dairy cows, they had other livestock. They had horses, they had sheep, they had hogs, they had fowl that they had programs for on the farm. By 1928, the farm had produced and sold 10,000 head of livestock, 7,000 sheep, 1,300 head of hogs, and 1,000 horses. So it was really quite a place. It was really quite important to the development around here. Strathmore was the first for the CPR. There were other centers that were built, demonstration farms. Brooks, the horticultural center there, started off as a demonstration farm. And they, in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, they built them as well. Let me move on to the next one. See, here we go. I want to go forward. Okay, there we go. All right. The next slide, this is a photo that I that I love. It was taken from one of the grain elevators that used to exist in Kinsman Park. And it's looking south. I'm just going to try and can you see the pointer that I'm, the cursor? No, you can't see the cursor? Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, you can see these puddles of water on the ditch, the drainage ditch that we now have going down to Eagle Lake. And you see the second one, the larger one? Well, just beyond that, you see that there are some tracks there. And just to help you orient yourself, that's where the Trans-Canada Highway is today. Okay? So that's back in probably the early 1920s when that photo was taken and the farm was operating.
And I don't want you to stress, Mr. Kleiber. We're going to give you a little more time, so don't worry about your time.
Okay.
I think it's an important
Yes.
an important item that you're bringing to us, so we'll definitely give you some more time.
So all right, yeah. So let me go back to this because you see these little sheds to the left of the screen. They were for sheep, and then the long barns were for fowl north of the highway. South of the highway, you'll see a tower. That was a water tower. They had to have their own water pressure, so there was a well there, and they had a big water tower that they had there. Immediately behind the water tower, you'll see, greenhouses. Okay? And so that was another program that they had here. This photo is taken from the south looking north. So again, at the top left-hand side, you can see that water tower, you can see the greenhouses. The first barn was a horse barn. The next barn with the writing on it was a stock barn. Following that is the dairy barn. And in behind the dairy barn, you can just sort of see the roof of it there, but that was the bunkhouse. At one time, they had 21 men that did nothing but milk cows. And that bunkhouse was moved uptown. And it was just torn down recently here in town. It existed for quite a number of years uptown here. And so they also, the farm also generated its own power. And I was told today that the power generation was for the farm operation only, that the houses that were on the farm didn't have power. They weren't allowed to share in the power. They had their own candles, I guess, that they used. The next photo that I'd like to show you is, I get a kick out of this one because if you look closely at the lady that's feeding the chickens, she's dressed for the opera. And now, no, it's not Diane or Denise. But what I think the CPR was doing here, what they used to do, and this is one thing that helped bring so many settlers to North America and to Canada, is they used to take poster shots. And I think that's what they're doing here, because I think they wanted to send this back to Europe to say to the Europeans, hey, you know what? We really are cultured here. This is the way we dress when we feed the chickens and whatnot. This is just normal dress. And so you want to come and homestead here. You want to come in and be part of us. So the other photo that I have, the last slide that I have, is a photo of the head office for the irrigation district that was here. And it's I feel really sad that we don't have that anymore, because it was beautiful, a beautiful building, as you can tell. And if you look at the top, that was all glass at the top, the peak. And there was an atrium that went all the way through the building, right down to the ground floor. So it was really spectacular for its time. So from my point of view, and I hope that I would have convinced you too, that if we go back and we look at the beginning and we say, okay, so the CPR made the decision to change the route, but it's what happened at Strathmore that made the history. Okay? The irrigation project and the demonstration farm, they changed Canadian history. And all you have to do is look at the development that happened around here in the county, southern Alberta, the prairies, all the way back to Winnipeg. The chances of that happening had the railroad gone from Winnipeg to Edmonton are probably pretty slim. So anyway, we will propose to the town a project that I think is going to build on that historic significance, especially of the demonstration farm. We want to turn that into a tourist attraction, and we will be coming forward in the new year with an area structure plan. I have assembled a team of professionals that are very interested in this. We have been working with them and with over 30 people that are residents of the town of Strathmore, the county of Wheatland. We've been working with the staff, and I want to really thank the staff while I'm here tonight. They have been most helpful and supportive in us reaching the area structure plan that we have devised. So you might ask the question, because I'm not that familiar with all of you, you might ask the question, well, gee, I see an old geezer standing in front of me, and he's going to propose a development. but I don't really know him. So I'm proud to say that Strathmore is my hometown. I grew up here. My family moved here in 1947, the spring of 1947. And I lived here ever since until the mid-1970s when I did move away. I was lucky enough to spend time in 3 of our great universities, undergrad program at University of Calgary, master's University of Western Ontario, and doctoral research at the University of Alberta. So I was happy to that. In 1971, I actually got involved in Strathmore's growth and development in 1968, but we'll leave that one because it's not that major. But in 1970-71, I put together a group of 5 people that we applied to the town to annex Section 23 to the town. Now, the Section 23, the hospital sort of sits in the middle of Section 23, okay? So it's a mile by a mile by a mile, which was a huge annexation at that time because a lot of people thought that Strathmore was going to stay forever encircled by the tracks. The tracks would be the northern boundary, nothing would ever happen beyond that. And so we had that annexed, and I'm amazed at what's happened over the years with that. I had the pleasure of developing part of it. It's known today as Cambridge Glen. And so that was, I believe, was the first laneless subdivision that the town of Strathmore had. And we had a rough time seeing that through as well, because it was something new, and there were a lot of people that were against it at the time. The next project I took on is called Ranch Estates, which, again, is something very different when you look at manufactured housing parks around the province. And so I really look forward to doing something with this historic site that is part of what used to be the demonstration farm here in Strathmore. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you. And I lived in Cambridge Glen for almost 17 years, and I loved the whole subdivision. It was just a great place to live.
Yes.
It was very, very nice. Questions from councilors? Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. The best course I took in university actually was about the history of Calgary and the Calgary area, specifically kind of centering around the CPR. And so learning about the where and the why and the who is extremely interesting to me. So I really want to thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
How many acres was the demonstration farm originally?
My understanding is that it was about 2,000 acres.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it would take in, let me see, all what you see on the area before you there, it would take in all of the area where we're preparing the area structure plan for, plus it would take in the 3/4 of section 12, which is immediately to the east. Actually, it took in the 4/4 because the Knight family bought the northeast quarter. And then I believe it also took in what became the Chris Seitz ranch. Yeah.
Okay. And one more question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you know roughly what year that building, the CPR demonstration building, was torn down? Like that kind of house-looking one?
That was torn down or built? I'm sorry?
Yeah, that it was torn down. Do you know when that was torn down?
The
Like that head office.
Sorry, the irrigation head office.
Yeah.
Let me see. Well, when did all I can think of is Olga Fedowich. I'm sorry, that isn't her married name.
Yeah, but Marlene, yeah.
Pardon me?
Marlene, right?
Yes. When did they build their house? Because they built their house right immediately, not immediately, but immediately west of the co-op parking lot. So the lot is for sale now. They tore the house down here, I think, a few years ago. So the lot is for sale. But the gentleman worked as a mechanic here in town, worked for Risden Motors, and he tore the building down in order to use the lumber to build a house for his family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would have been in the 50s, wouldn't it?
No,
Earlier than
it was after the 50s. I think it was in the 60s that he would have torn it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate the lesson.
Good.
So.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson.
I'm really grateful you're here and filled with gratitude and hopefulness about this. And it's an amazing undertaking. Strathmore is just, town of Strathmore has just undergone a new rebranding called Rural Reimagined.
Good.
And I'm wondering if you'd like to speak briefly, to how you envision this process that you're undertaking leading into that brand, lending itself to that brand. How will this project reimagine our way of being rural?
Yes. Okay, so the process for me, I've been involved in this for the last 5 years. And it was 12 or 13 years ago that I restored the barn that's on the historic property, and it just sat there. And it took all that time, and it took my daughter's wedding and your son's wedding to all of a sudden, yes, and your family wedding, to all of a sudden make me realize that, hey, the barn is more than just part of a farm, okay? It has sex appeal. Yeah. and so I started asking people questions. I started saying, okay, so we got the barn. What should we do? What should we do? And the project isn't mine. I'm part of it, but it isn't mine. It's pieces from people that I talked to over the years. Things they would say that, I like this or I don't like that or something like that. And so anyway, we have finally come to an agreement that our plan has threefold focus. Number one is history, because we've got the site and we know the history and we know it's important, not only to this town, but across Canada. The other one is agriculture, because it started off as an agricultural demonstration farm. So we want to portray agriculture in the past, in the present, and the future. And that's why we even plan to have a section set aside that we want to attract an educational institution to come in and do some research here, agricultural research, okay? And the third focus is tourism. And one reason that we focused on that is that in the research I did, when you look at restored historic sites, none of them make money. They have a tough time surviving. And we too are going to ask for your support, okay? But even Heritage Park in Calgary, which is huge, doesn't make money. And we found that out about 3 years ago when they couldn't use their boat and they lost over $1 million, okay, that year in their operation, simply because part of the operation wasn't functional. So we're settling on tourism. We hope that this development is going to turn Strathmore into a tourism destination. And so when you're living rural reimagined, then this fits right in. It becomes part of that. And we're hoping that it is going to be attractive not only to local people, but people in the province, other provinces across the nation, and even internationally. I've been surprised, I've been amazed actually, with the weddings that have been held in the barn. I've been amazed at the number of people that are foreigners that attend the weddings. They don't come to see the barn, they come to be part of the wedding, But still, I would say we've had people in the barn from virtually every continent on this globe. They've been here from Australia, New Zealand, from Africa, from the Middle East, from Asia, from Europe, you name it. They've been here.
That was mostly just my family. Thank you. That's an answer that only a university professor could give. It's a really good answer. I have a second question, Bruce. And
Sure.
Strathmore has an intensive and increasingly close relationship with the Siksika, and the Siksika have a different relationship with the CPR than your ancestors and my settler ancestors. And so, you know, I know that yours and your wife's deep and respectful relationship with the Siksika, and you both carry a lot of profound cultural understanding, and specifically around the Siksika ways of knowing. And I'm wondering how you envision that relationship unfolding in this context.
I hope it does. I really do. And can I answer that in a roundabout way? Okay, kind of sneak up on it, because this was attempted once before. In the 1980s, the town council commissioned studies by the University of Calgary, the Department of Environmental Design. They worked up a budget and everything. It was about even in the 1980s, it was a $28 million project, okay? About $12,500,000 for the core. And that core was going to be supported by the town of Strathmore for about 32%. The CPR, the province, were each going to put in 25%, and the federal government was going to make up the other 18%. But the agreement they wrote up was all conditional. If you act, I'll act. And if you act, I'll act, okay? Everybody, well, nothing happened, okay? So we're doing it in a different way this time. We're saying, we're going to show our commitment right off the bat. And if we can register an area structure plan, then we know we have the town's commitment. Then we want to start visiting other important bodies and associations. Siksika is one of them. CPR is another. I've already talked to the Ag Society. I've talked to Western District Irrigation. I think I said at the beginning, I view this as a community project. I'm just a part of it. And so we're open to whatever suggestions people have, and more than willing to sit down and work something out with them. You'll see in our area structure plan, there's a conceptual drawing. That isn't to say that that's the way we plan it, or that's the way we feel it has to unfold. It's just to give people an idea of what could happen there. So yes, so my hope is that Siksika would be interested, and I'd really welcome them to get involved.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for coming, Mr. Kleiber. I think it's really exciting. I think a lot of us who've lived here a long time are ready for something like this, and it fits perfectly with our vision and our rebranding. So we're looking forward to what we see coming towards us, and I know our staff is ready, willing, and able to work with you.
Yes.
They're a really good group of people in all the departments.
They are wonderful, yes.
And thank you for acknowledging them too.
Yes, good.
Take
Thank
care.
you so much.
And if we don't see you, Merry Christmas.
Same to you. Yeah.
Okay, that brings us to number 5. We have no consent agenda tonight, and that brings us to item 6, confirmation of minutes. 6.1, regular council meeting minutes for November 3rd, 2021. Oh, Councillor Wagner, sorry.
I move that council adopt the November 3rd, 2021 regular council minute meetings as presented.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. 6.2, regular council meeting minutes for November 10th, 2021. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. I will move the November 10th regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. You've all heard that motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. 6.3, special council meeting minutes for November 13th, 2021. Councillor Langmaid.
I move that council adopt the November 13th, 2021 special council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Langmaid. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We move now to 6.4, special council meeting minutes for November 23rd, 2021. Councillor Langmaid.
I move that council adopt the November 23rd, 2021 special council meeting minutes as presented.
And I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion is carried, and that brings us to our final one, 6.5, special council meeting minutes for November 24th, 2021. Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I move that council adopt the November 24th, 2021 special council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. We have no tabled items tonight for number 7, and that brings us to 8 items or reports from administration. 8.1, solar farm reclamation costs, which is found on page 28 of our agenda. And Ethan, welcome. I was going to say we look forward to hearing this, but I'm really not looking forward to hearing this. But thank you and welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Strathmore Solar Project has been a great investment into the town by Capital Power and is a new revenue source for the coming years. With any construction project, there are items which are unexpected, and unfortunately in this situation, the responsibility of cleaning up this found debris lies with the town due to its containment of hazardous materials. The report I provided details the timeline from June 2021 through October 2021, where all costs were reviewed, and ultimately Capital Power offered to only charge the town for the hazardous materials disposal. The portion that they deemed would have been normal, just material disposal, they've covered. So that came out to a cost of approximately $315,000. Finance has confirmed that this cost will be covered through accumulated surplus for 2021. If council has any questions on this, I can answer them.
Thank you, Ethan. I have one question, if I can start us off. And I think this is for the public at home too, if they're watching or in the media tonight who are covering this. Do we know that the town of Strathmore is responsible for this material that's in the Southlands?
Your Worship, I can't say that the town was the one who physically buried the material. What I can say is the way the agreement is written up between the town and Capital Power, responsibility lies with the town through that agreement.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wiley and then Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Hi, so I'm just trying to get clarification. So I'm looking at the report, the background context. I just must not understand. It says here that the lease agreement between the parties contains a clause in which the tenant accepts the land as is, and the town makes no guarantees on the condition or suitability of the land for its intended use.
Your Worship, through the chair to you, Councillor, you are correct, there is that clause, but there's a separate clause which puts the liability on the town, and there is a clause which the town stated that there was no hazardous material on this property. So when that hazardous material was found, it broke that clause, and then we were no longer complying with the terms of the agreement, so that's where the responsibility came to the town.
Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. Sorry, where's the funds coming for to cover this cost?
Your Worship, through the chair, accumulated surplus. And I'm sure Mel can explain that better than I can.
It's coming from surpluses from the past, accumulated over years in our surplus account.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And mine isn't a question. Mine is I think it's something all of our staff feel as we've gone forward. There's just been so much contamination found in this town, and it's just, it's very frustrating, and I know I guess frustrating is the best word, because we found it in Westridge Road. We found it in this parking lot when we were doing the digging for the new town hall. Yeah, the new high school, yeah. And now this one on the solar farm, solar farmlands. It's just, again, it's just so frustrating that we have to take care of this stuff, and we keep finding more and more. And it's just mind-boggling, I guess. Thank you. I just had to vent. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. This is kind of like I guess maybe a technical question. Is it the fact that it's vermiculite by itself that's the problem, or is it suspected to have like asbestos or something in it?
Your Worship, through the chair, vermiculite is considered a form of asbestos when it comes to hazard materials under the Act.
Okay.
So as soon as something that's found that falls under the Act, it has to be declared hazardous, and then there's certain protocols for disposal that have to be followed.
Okay. Like, is vermiculite used now for anything? Like, I was under the impression that things still have vermiculite in some instances.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I'm sure there's a use somewhere.
Sorry, may I?
Councillor Langmead.
Thank you. Vermiculite was commonly used in home insulation up until the late 80s. Past 1990, it wasn't used anymore. So it still can be found in some industrial applications, but it's not a common material to run into anymore.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
I had
Councillor
a
Wagner.
question. I'll go next.
Oh, sorry, did you have another one?
It's okay. You can go.
Okay, Councillor Wagner.
Okay, thank you. Ethan, hello. Just one question. Now, looking at the pictures, and it says suspected vermiculite. Has this been tested to actually confirm that it is asbestos containing?
Yeah, Your Worship, through the chair, that was one of the first steps they did. So the pictures you saw, that was pretty much the very first thing that Capital Power sent to us when they notified us of this. They were just the best pictures I had to share the story with council. It was confirmed through lab tests before it was ever hauled away to anywhere. Typically, any landfill or other disposal site will require a test before they accept it anyway. So yes, that happened.
Okay, and just one other thing. Can I just add to that vermiculite thing? Vermiculite it's still very common. The vermiculite that is suspected of having asbestos in it generally comes from around that Libby, Montana area. They do the mining there, and there was a 10% vein of tremolite asbestos, and that has been shipped around the country for decades, and so that's why vermiculite itself doesn't have asbestos in it unless it comes from specific regions.
Thank you, Councillor Wagner. Councillor Langmead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Wagner, for clarifying that the asbestos version of vermiculite is not commonly used. I just had questions regarding, do we know the history of how this material came to be buried on this land? 2013 is not all that much of the distant past. Do we know when that would have been deposited, by whom? Is there any pathway of maybe looking at the person who might have done that?
Your Worship, through the chair to you, Councillor, I would be speculating on any of that. We know it's an old building. We don't know exactly where it came from. We assume from somewhere in town, but we don't know that either. So we know it was buried somewhere in that period between 2012 and 2014, but where the building came from and what it was previously, we don't know.
Did we own the property in 2013, 2014? We did. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Any other? Oh, Councillor Wiley, thank you.
So I'm not familiar with the project, this solar farm project. What percentage of the town's commitment to this project is this overrun cost?
Your Worship, through the chair to you, Councillor, the town has no financial commitment to this project. The town collects a lease, which I don't believe we've collected yet. I could be wrong. Sorry, yes, we have collected our lease payment for this year. So the town just simply collects a lease as the landowner. We have no financial commitment into the project.
One last question for Mr. Teedy, and you can just answer it from there if you want. It's up to you. My question is, I think you said we're taking it from accumulated surplus. Are you comfortable? We still have plenty of funds in there?
I'm comfortable with taking it from accumulated surplus. I wouldn't go so far as to say we have plenty of funds. We do have funds, but we're fine with applying this expense to accumulated surplus.
Thank you. Seeing that there are no other questions, thank you, Ethan. And maybe just a timeline, when are you folks planning to do this reclamation work?
Your worship, all the reclamation has been completed. We had to do that in order to finalize the costs. So the work is now done. It's just a matter of letting council know of what happened and how much it cost us.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
I will move the council accept the solar farm reclamation costs report as information.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You've all heard the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. That brings us to item 8.2, Hope's Cradle Baby Box, which is page 37. And good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Just want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to hear this initiative of Hope's Cradle. I'll give you a brief history on it, and then based on the report that you guys were provided earlier, you can obviously answer me or ask me some questions afterwards. So this initiative started back in early 2019. I was sitting at home with my wife and my newborn baby watching the news, and a news story came on about a baby that was abandoned in a dumpster in Calgary. I'm sure many of you remember it on Christmas Eve of 2017. Obviously, as a new father, this hit me pretty hard and weighed heavy in my mind over the last few weeks, and I thought, what can we do to not have this happen anymore? And kind of thought about it, and a few weeks later, another news story aired about safe haven baby boxes in the United States. And what that program is a safety surrender box that is installed into a fire department in the United States, where a mother could surrender a child safely and avoid being criminally charged, and it gives the child a chance of life by putting it in the care of the first responders until it's able to be placed with a state agency. So that started, my wife looked at me and said, well, why don't you guys do that? And I looked at her and said, you're right, why don't we do that? So that kind of started my research on it. Through the research, I've initially reached out to Safe Haven, the non-for-profit company in the United States, talked to them in great length about the criminal conduct or criminal code in the United States. And obviously there's some differences in Canada versus the United States. They actually have a safe haven law, which states that no mother will be criminally charged if the baby is abandoned in a safe scenario. We don't have that law, which obviously was our first hurdle that we had to cross. So that kind of got the wheels rolling, and we sought a legal opinion, which you guys saw the firm, I guess, in the report provided to you. We consulted with them. They came back with a favorable opinion that we can operate this with very limited liability as long as the correct policies, procedures, and construction is put in place. So that kind of gave us a lot of hope that we could make this actually happen. So from there, I began talking to RCMP, doing further research on if any mothers have been actually charged for safely surrendering their baby. And I was unable to find any cases of a mother being charged if the baby was safely surrendered. And to be honest, those safely surrendered was fairly lax. I was surprised. I mean, this includes being left in a box outside of a busy gas station. So in the history of Canada, no mother's been charged if the baby has been left safely. Obviously, mothers have been charged if they've been left in a dumpster or there's been signs of negligence or abuse to that child. So from that legal opinion, we also continued our research, spoke with a lot of other partners in the municipality. We spoke with FCSS here at the town, spoke with the clergy in the town, WADEMSA, who is the local ambulance service, obviously, in town, I spoke with AHS, the local partners. Everyone was in support of it. Throughout the research, I also got placed in touch with members of Angel's Cradle, which is another baby box that operates at the Misericordia and the Grey Nuns Hospital through Covenant Health, which is up in Edmonton. And Dr. Self was the chair of that, and he was instrumental in kind of pointing us in the right direction in developing policy and procedure to ensure that it's safely done. And he was supportive of the legal opinion as well, that because the baby is placed in the care of first responders, that the mother would not be found negligent and the criminal charges brought upon the mother. So about 4 months ago or so, I was approached by a local charity, which is Gems for Gems, and they had also been working on this initiative, but they did not have anywhere to place this baby box because they're just kind of a private sector charity, and they didn't have a partner to make this happen. So they approached us with some financial contributions and marketing and kind of get the word out there. As my initial plan was to have this for Strathmore, but obviously there's potential for growth throughout the country. We'd be the first fire department in Canada to operate this sort of initiative, which I think is a huge badge of honor for the town of Strathmore, as well as the Strathmore Fire Department, because it puts us on the leading edge of kind of changing the fire service. And that's became kind of a passion of mine as well, is to see this adopted and spread throughout Canada. And so we chose to partner with that charity. And we're at the point now that we've had contractors look at it, give us quotes. And just to be clear, this initiative is funded all entirely from the Strathmore Emergency Services Members Association, which is basically all of the volunteers and full-time members of the fire department have pooled money together to pay for this, as well as obviously the charity coming in to support us financially and then kind of take over the project. So they are the ones that named it Hope's Cradle, and we were happy with that name and kind of gave them the blessing to carry it on throughout Canada as much as they can, and hopefully get like-minded fire departments on board with this initiative to help it grow and save lives. So yeah, we're basically at the point where we're ready for construction to begin, and a ribbon cutting ceremony shortly after that, once the policy and procedure around testing has been completed. And we're very excited to provide this service to not only Strathmore, but the neighboring communities. And I should mention that too, during the research, that was one of the biggest things I found surprising in speaking with Safe Haven, is they had noted that the uptick of babies being surrendered was greater in rural areas outside of major metropolitan centers. They don't have a lot of research around it, but they suggest it kind of circles around anonymity of the mother. So you may not be comfortable going to a hospital in a major metro or a fire hall in a major metro, but you'd be more than willing to drive the 40 minutes to safely surrender your child and put it in proper care if you're in that situation. And I guess, yeah, not only that, but we've also developed a robust connection with a lot of mental health supports for the expectant mother. We're not going to be advertising this as a come drop your baby off here. This is a last line of defense to save lives. And as a firefighter, that's something that we're all very passionate about, is saving lives. And we just felt it's an amazing initiative that costs basically nothing. And I don't see it being utilized a lot, but if over the years, it very well could, and for the cost that we put in, the reward of saving that life would be unimaginable. And just for a bit of further research, the Angel's Cradle locations have been used successfully over the last 11 or 12 years that they've been in operation. They have been used successfully. They're very stringent on the numbers due to FOIP reasons, and we would be following a similar process as that as well. So this isn't something that we're going to be screaming from the top of the roofs. We're going to be protecting the mother's anonymity and obviously caring for the baby first and foremost. So thank you very much again. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you for your drive and your passion on this project. I think it's going to be something that's going to be really important, and if it takes off and spreads to other communities, that'll be just amazing. Mine is just a quick question. I'm imagining that it involves cutting into the structure of the fire hall. Whereabouts would it be, and how? And when do you think this might be all finished?
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, you are correct. How the baby box operates is through an external door through the wall, and this door locks. There's a lot that goes into it, and I'll save you from that. But it would be placed in the south parking lot of the fire hall, essentially flush mounted with the wall, and the bassinet or incubator will be what is in the training room of the fire hall right now.
Thank you for that clarification. I have Deputy Mayor Montgomery and then Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for this information. And I'm frankly just blown away at the initiative you've taken and the fact you've identified kind of a problem like this and you've found a solution and you've done all the legwork. And the solution that you've come up with as well, it's very impressive as well. And as much as I hope it's never going to be used, I just want to say, kudos to you and thank you very much for bringing this to our community and for taking the lead as well for other communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. Well done. Good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, you will save lives.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson.
I just want to say I spent the better part of 40 years working with young mothers in our communities, surrounding communities, and I assure you that this has a place in our community and in our broader community particularly. And I think that the amount of work that you've put into it is just hugely commendable. And I think it speaks to the heart of our fire department. And it's one of the reasons we're all so very proud of all of you. And congratulations on your own baby, too, and your own family. Thank you.
Thank you once again. It's very much appreciated and very proud of you and your efforts.
Great. Thank you very much.
That brings us to 8
There's a
point.
motion on-
Oh, sorry. We are looking for a motion on this. Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I would move that we accept the presentation as presented.
Thank you very much. You all heard that motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. And our next item is 8.3 Area Structure Plan. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Megan Williams. I am the Planner 3 for the Town of Strathmore, and I do have a presentation to accompany the report that I included in the council package today, if you guys would like to hear it. Yeah. Perfect. So, we are bringing this presentation before you today to give everyone a stronger understanding of area structure plan, specifically because we're going to be bringing the Legacy Farm Area Structure Plan at the beginning of the new year. Very exciting. Area structure plans, or ASPs, are high-level long-term planning documents. The Municipal Government Act, which is the document that regulates how local governments should govern and plan for growth, has set out minimum requirements for area structure plans. Municipalities do have the ability to ask for more within those ASPs, as ASPs are expected to act as an extension of the Municipal Development Plan. Being able to set requirements above what the Municipal Government Act has laid out will help with achieving the objectives of the Municipal Development Plan. An MDP, or a Municipal Development Plan, is the long-term planning document that guides growth for the whole municipality for about 20 years. The planning hierarchy was included in the council package. I'll just put it up on the screen here for you. It shows how the flow of the plan, specifically which aspects of planning are influenced and controlled by which plans. So you can kind of see there the area structure plan is near the top after the municipal development plan, and then all of the other kind of short-term planning, such as the land use bylaw, subdivision, and redesignation are all controlled by area structure plans. So area structure plans guide development and land use of a specific area for a period of about 10 years. Studies are included with area structure plans, and they're used to better inform those policies, though they're typically high-level desktop studies that are included. ASPs are adopted through bylaw. They must be given 3 separate readings by council, and a public hearing must be held prior to the second reading. Additionally, because Strathmore is within the Calgary Metropolitan Region, it may be required to refer an ASP to the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board prior to third reading. After third reading, the ASP is officially adopted and becomes a public document. ASPs can be amended and just following the same process. After an ASP is adopted, any subdivision, land use, and development that occurs within the plan area is required to follow these policies and guidelines outlined within the plan. Though staff typically perform a preliminary review of ASPs every year or so, It's good planning practice to do an in-depth review of an ASP every 5 to 10 years. This ensures the document stays current with Council's strategic plan and overall vision for the town. So the town does have several approved ASPs right now. We've got Edgefield, Lakewood Meadows, and Wildflower Ranch. Those are the three that we're kind of actively developing right now. We did include some excerpts in the report from the Wildflower Ranch, just so you guys could see some examples of the maps and the policies that you can expect from an area structure plan. So this map here is the land use and transportation concept. It gives a pretty general idea of what different types of land uses will occur where. So we've got like residential outlined and park. It also shows how transportation, so the roads that will go in, specifically how they'll connect to the existing road network. This one is the water distribution, so similar to the transportation, it just shows where the main trunk lines of the water is going to go and how it connects to the existing. And then the phasing plan, which is also very important, it shows staff and council how the area is going to develop out, in which order. It's important as well so that we know when those connections are going to happen to the existing infrastructure for roads, for water, for sewer, for parks and pathways. We also pulled policies from the Wildflower Ranch ASP. So policies will typically be separated into different sections referencing different proposed land uses, green space, transportation, and underground infrastructure. Policies help keep the larger picture in mind, and they ensure consistency as the plan area builds out over 10 or so years. Adopting ASPs is a very in-depth and technical process that does have long-term development implications. So staff, we're giving you this information at this time just to give you more experience with area structure plans and to give you an opportunity to ask questions regarding the process or on area structure plans in general. Very important to maintain the integrity of the public hearing process for the Legacy Farm ASP. We are requesting that you hang on to any questions regarding the Legacy Farm ASP at this time. And then we can answer them for first reading or at the public hearing. So that does conclude our presentation. We're available to answer questions now, or if you wish to send questions to us afterwards, after you've kind of digested the information a bit, we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and information. Are there any questions from councillors? I have Councillor Wiley, then Deputy Mayor Montgomery, then Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you. I guess I'm just going to reiterate what I thought I heard you say. So an area structure plan is different than, say, a subdivision plan in that it also lays out the roads, the infrastructure, the water, and all those things too.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. We go now to Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Could you talk a little bit about when an area structure plan has to be run by the CMRB, please?
So the CMRB has some requirements within their interim IREF, and within their growth plan that states that if there's an area structure plan that comes in that has a certain number of residences, that's considered an employment area. And is there a third check? I can't remember. Yeah, off the top, I'd have to look it up, but I know it's like, I think 50 dwellings, and if it's going to be an employment area.
Okay, and also like, I believe if it's like considered regionally significant, which is like within a certain distance of the boundary of the municipality, perhaps?
More than likely that would trigger it as well, I think.
Okay.
I can't remember. If it was within a certain distance of a municipal boundary.
Within a certain distance of a municipal boundary?
Yeah.
I don't know that one, Councilor
so.
Montgomery. Maybe we can get back to you with that
Yeah,
answer.
we'll have to, unfortunately, we'll have to go look it up
Okay.
and then we can
Yeah.
respond.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Langmaid.
I have a couple of questions. The first one I have is I understand that area structure plans are basically a subset of our municipal development plan. Our municipal development plan that's currently on our town website was last updated in 2014, and I hear you say, they last about 20 years, but they should be reviewed every 5, I believe it says in the document. So was that reviewed in 2019? I just want to make sure as we're going into the new year, thinking about reviewing a new area structure plan, we're using our most updated municipal development plan to assess it.
So over the last couple of years, we have been going through a big review process for our MDP. We have a draft in the work right now, and I'm, knock on wood, I do believe we are expecting next year to bring it. Yeah, we're expecting to bring it forward next year.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question I have is, could you just provide some clarification for me around that boundary that we use for working with Wheatland County to adopt area structure plans under an intermunicipal development plan with the county? Does that still exist?
So because Strathmore is within the Calgary metropolitan region, we are exempt from entering into an intermunicipal development plan with the county. That's not to say that we wouldn't circulate them ahead of time. We have. It's neighborly, right? Yeah, and that doesn't mean that we couldn't in future enter into an IDP with them if that's what ended up happening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Langmaid. Councillor Mitzner.
Where does the urban fringe fall in? I thought if you're in the boundaries of the town of Strathmore, then both the town of Strathmore and the county of Wheatland are allowed to look at the development agreement.
I think that we have technically an urban fringe. We have kind of development areas in town that are somewhat on the border, and that could be technically the urban fringe, but some areas have ASPs there, some areas are just left as ag for future planning. Yeah. Oh, and maybe you're referring to an older type of classifying development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner. No other questions? Then we're looking for a motion to accept. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. I will move the council accept the ASP presentation and report as information.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you again, Megan and Chuck. 8.4, draft financial report to September 30th, 2021 on page 53. Lisa, good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Your Worship, Council, we ask that you accept the draft financial report to September 30th, 2021 as information. Please note that this report does not include adjustments for the 680 Westchester Road sale, the reclamation costs on the solar panel site, and the retro pay for the RCMP.
Thank you for that. Any questions for Lisa? Seeing none, then we're looking for a motion to accept. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
I had some questions that I sent to administration about the capital project list. Is that the time to ask those now?
Mr. Legore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe Mr. Teedy will speak to that part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. There were 10 projects that were canceled within the capital budget program. The total of the capital projects that were canceled in total amounted to $650,000. This is less than 10% of the total capital program budget. The largest projects have been brought to council where funds have been redirected. One other thing to keep in mind as you look through the numbers there, that where grants have been involved, we still have to work with the granting agency on the redirection or the any adjustment on projects where additional funds have been spent. So the largest projects that the largest one was the Aquatic Center roof project. And it was canceled, and the funds were redirected to the family center. One other project was the protective services temporary expansion, and the amount was directed towards the space here within the municipal building. The next largest was the Center Street upgrade project. In that case, the project had been completed in 2020. At the time the capital budget was put forward, we were unsure whether it would be completed or whether it would become part of the 2021 capital program. And in that case, the funds from the federal gas tax was not spent. So in each of the cases, solutions were found to where funds were redirected to use the funds within the project or within the budget, and in all cases, we did not exceed the total capital spend of the program. Were there any specific questions that we could answer on any of the projects?
Not specifically about the I kind of have a list of the projects, that I referred to in my email, but I guess my question is going forward, will administration be coming back, if there's funds being redirected or projects canceled and those funds being redirected, will administration come back and seek reapproval for the use of those funds?
Within the within the budget policy, there's provision for redirection of funds up to $200,000 for capital projects provided, which is a normal thing. I was looking at Airdrie's policy, and their policy is up to $500,000, so we're significantly smaller in terms of the ability to redirect funds within the capital program, provided it does not exceed the total capital spend, and we're attempting to do that. Keep in mind, your capital program is funded not by tax dollars, but by either borrowing or grants or reserves.
So earlier this year, we amended the policy and to include, and there was some clarification, and I even sought to clarify this during our budget presentation last week, that it's not about the amount of money that's being redirected, and even Councillor Sobel last term, he was on side with this principle that it's not about the amount of money that's being redirected. It's about the fact that there's money that was, we're essentially, when administration comes to us and says, hey, we want to buy this, this thing, and council says, yeah, sure, here's some money for it. We're saying we're buying that product. And so if administration wants to turn around and get a different product or cancel buying that project, then that has to come back to us, regardless of the amount of money. And that's something that the policy itself says, if there's any material changes or any changes of scope, it doesn't say anything about within a certain amount of money. It says if there's any changes at all, that money has to come, or it has to come back for reapproval. And I would like that, I guess, to be followed, that, yeah, if and even if it's, like I said, even if it's just coming back, you know, to be rubber stamped, you know, hey, yeah, go ahead and, you know, like spend it on that. The whole point of that change of policy was so that it had to come back regardless of the amount or the size. You know, I'll give you an example with the sign at the arena. You know, when we initially agreed to purchase a freestanding sign, and then that was changed. It was only an well, it was $80,000 originally that we budgeted, and then administration ended up spending $40,000, and you know, there's problems that resulted from kind of installing the sign the way it was. And so it's not about the amount, you know, that certainly that $40,000 is, you know, less than $80,000, and that's less than the $200,000, but it's not about the amount. It's about the fact that we're agreeing to buy a certain thing, and then we're not buying that thing. And so it's important that council be accountable for the money that we're actually spending by that coming back to us for reapproval. If you'd like to comment.
So in the case of the community kitchen dishwasher, $7,000, a small amount, would council like us to come back? We redirected the funds to buy a floor scrubber. Piece of equipment, same facility. Is it the intention of council to have administration come back for things of a small nature? I mean,
If I can weigh in, I wouldn't want us to get involved in small items because that puts us dangerously close to operations and making operations decisions. I wouldn't have a clue which dishwasher to get, or if I diverted funds to a floor scrubber, I wouldn't know the usage or how important it was or which one to get. So I would be hesitant on small dollar items like that. But you know, I can understand where Deputy Mayor Montgomery's coming from as far as large items. Does the policy, and maybe this is a question for administration, does the current policy still give some leeway to our staff within a certain budget range that they can that you can make these decisions on your own?
There, okay. Our current policy certainly gives sufficient leeway to administration to deal with it within the restraints and constraints that council has put on. And we do advocate that we follow that policy. If we're outside that policy, we will come to council prior. And we do report our financials to you on a quarterly basis, so you are kept aware of any changes that we're making. To make that policy any tighter than what you currently have in place, you're really tying the hands of administration. It becomes difficult for them to deal with these projects. They're going to be bringing a lot of items back to council. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Montgomery?
Well, I just want to be clear that the policy, like, it literally says that if there's any changes of scope or material changes, that those have to, it doesn't say anything about the amount. So if administration, like, you know, I agree, it's kind of tough to have, you know, $7,000 say come back to us. So if administration wants to put something in there that, you know, maybe modifies that, but my understanding is based on, you know, the discussion we had last term, that it was not about the amount of money. It was about the fact that what we, you know, essentially, like I said, what we were agreeing to buy, you know, we're no longer buying. And in order, and we, you know, council it's not operational for council to be, you know, looking at capital spends. That's part of our function, is to, you know, approve or not capital spends. And I have no interest, you know, in interfering with operations. You know, I'm not going to tell you how to, you know, do X, Y, or Z. But when it comes to, like I said, if we get sold on a certain product or idea, and we say, okay, yeah, we're going to buy that certain product or idea, it's, you know, we have to be in charge, and we have to be accountable for that money. And so, yeah, like I said, if administration wants to bring back some sort of an amendment, you know, to allow, like, say, $10,000 or something like that, you know, spends under $10,000 or something, that's, you know, I think that's certainly something that I'm sure would probably be fine. But yeah, the whole point of it was that we need to be accountable. And there were certain instances where we were not accountable. You know, when somebody says, hey, you know, why is there, you know, a sign blinding me from the arena? You know, we go, hey, we don't know. We approved a freestanding sign that's supposed to face east-west. You know, we don't know how that happened. That's, you know, that's a problem. And so I just wanted to, I guess, clarify that at this point, the policy does say that, you know, any sort of changes need to come back to us. And so, yeah, like, you know, some of these are fairly sizable. And as I said, you know, like administration, all they have to do is just kind of give us a little bit of info and say, you know, it's better to spend the money on this. And I don't foresee any problems with that. I have other questions, but I'll let other people go first, I guess. Thank you very much, Mel.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Peterson.
Sorry, if I could just jump in with a point of information.
Okay.
For the folks at home, could we please clarify exactly what policy we're talking about? Because we keep saying the policy, but I'm not sure people at home will know what exactly we're talking about.
Go ahead.
So it's the budget policy, and if council would like, I can arrange for it to be emailed to you actually right now, if that's something that council would like.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the policy was just distributed to all of council. And one thing, if I could add, Mr. Mayor, you got to be very careful that you don't tie the hands of administration. And I particularly look at work that's done in Ethan's area. When you're working on a road project or something, you come across emergent situations. You either deal with it right now and make that decision on the site, or you shut the job down and you're paying costs for that contractor being shut down, which can amount into significant penalties. And we have to trust our people that they're going to use the best judgment that they can. And you look at what we just encountered on the solar project with the contaminants there. You have to be able to deal with those. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I could respond to that quickly. I certainly see no issues with you know, completing a project as envisioned and that, you know, requiring extra funds to do so. It's one thing if, you know, we say, hey, yeah, you're gonna do Westridge Road, and then, you know, you turn around and use the funds to do Center Street. That's, you know, that's a change of scope and a material change. You know, saying that there's like, so maybe we should discuss this more and clarify, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that I did vote for that, for the motion that Councillor Montgomery was referencing in regard to budget, but at no time would I ever have advocated removing that $200,000 limit in terms of accountability. And I really believe that council has many, many options open to them to ensure that we follow our fiduciary and actuarial responsibilities related to our taxpayers and still allow our people to do their jobs in a way that is most efficient. And I think that is the key to accountability. For this council to be accountable, you need to find, or any council, you need to find a balance between being judicious in terms of our budgeting process that we go through, that you so capably take us through every year, many times during the year, and making sure that none of those interfere with the day-to-day operations of the community. And so I am pleased that Councillor Montgomery brought that process forward on those major items, and it addressed issues that that community has dealt with for a very long time, and I think it was time for that. But I would not agree that doing something in the process of interfering with operations would be useful to this council or to this community. Thank you, Your Worship.
Where we're at right now with this policy change that we made, does administration, does staff have the flexibility to make changes? And I'm thinking, you know, with your example that Deputy Mayor that you mentioned about the sign, some of it in the previous administration could have been just better communication. Like, I would have been satisfied hearing why we switched from a street side road, a street side sign east-west, and why it was switched to a building. You know, sometimes that's all you need for a council, is to just be brought up to speed on the decision-making process. But I guess what I'm asking right now, the way the policy stands, the way it was changed by the previous council, does administration and staff have that flexibility to work and make changes if they need to on a project?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we think it does. It clearly says the CAO, conjunction with the Director of Corporate Services, may authorize amendments up to $200,000, provided the amendment is within the total approved budget. Capital budget amendments over $200,000 require an amending motion by council. And that gives us the leeway we need. And then it goes on that capital budget amendments for a new program or service or a significant change in the service level require an approving motion by council. And then it says amendments to the capital budget that alters the scope of a project or materially changes the appearance or functionality of a project shall be reviewed and authorized by council. And we feel we're living within that, Mr. Mayor.
Like the way that clause was intended, and that's again, like, you know, like we had that discussion, and as I said, Councillor Sobel even, you know, he recognized the importance of there not being a dollar amount attached to it, and that's, you know, that's how that was interpreted, that it's not tied to a dollar amount. It's not about tying the hands of administration to complete a project as envisioned. You know, yes, certainly you have the $200,000, you know, to complete a project, you know, so if you have, you know, that $80,000 sign would turn out to be $100,000, then certainly you would be able to spend that extra 20. But, you know, if you're changing it from a sign to, you know, something else, then that's where it has to come back, you know, so that council, because there's been a few instances over the last, like during my first term where, you know, like details were changed after we were sold on a certain idea, and it, you know, afterwards council was kind of going, well, you know, maybe we would have rather spent the money elsewhere and maybe not spent it, or maybe we would have spent a bit more to, you know, kind of get it done this certain way, and so it's that's why I just feel like it's important that we, and as the mayor said, you know, all it has to be is just like a, you know, quick, like, hey, you know, here's what we think we should do with it, you know? And, you know, 99 times out of 100, I think council will just say, yeah, sure, you know, thanks for the heads up. Great idea. Or maybe sometimes council will say, no, you know what, let's spend a bit more, let's do it differently, you know, like, and that's where I'm coming from anyways. So it's not about tying the hands of administration, it's just so that we're, you know, we're kept apprised and we're accountable, so that when people say, hey, why did the money get spent that way? We go, yeah, you know, we made that decision, you know, here's why we did it. And, you know, it's on us.
I'm wondering if it would be good for the new councilors as well. Do we want to revisit this policy as this new group that we have working in the next 4 years? Do we want to have this come back to us at a future date and re-examine it, discuss it? Would that be of help to everyone? No? Okay. Thought I'd float that balloon.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this policy was adopted in May of 2021. To me, the key for council on this, and I would tell any council this, is make sure that administration is bringing the information to you on a timely basis. Our finance department, corporate services here, bring a total budget to you on a quarterly basis. So every 3 months, you are getting the information. And nothing is being hidden. It's in the open. And if we're in breach of the policy, then you should chastise us. But we feel that we're living within that policy as is prepared and presented.
Yeah, like I'm certainly not trying to chastise anyone. I just, as I said, it was important to me to have that amendment put in, you know, like that, and that was the interpretation, that it was any changes. And I don't want to belabor this, but you know, I would appreciate going forward if you know, if we could follow that procedure. And if it needs to be adjusted, you know what, if administration finds it's too onerous, I have no issue with changing it. I just want to be accountable to the taxpayers. And I find I'm not accountable, I'm not able to be accountable when I don't know why a decision was made, or I wasn't making the decision. And so that's where I'm coming from. And I do have a couple questions, if that's all right.
I was just wondering if we could go on to Councillor Langmaid, Councillor Wiley, and then come back to you.
Yeah, absolutely, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just looking through here, I guess my question is more for Councillor Montgomery and the rest of council as well. I see this quarterly report as the notice that a project has been changed, and that our acceptance of this quarterly report serves as our acceptance of the change. This is our opportunity to review changes in projects that have been scheduled. Is there a different way that question one, am I incorrect in that kind of approach? Because I see this as, I have now been informed that instead of buying a new trackless sweeper, we are instead going to purchase a columbarium for the cemetery. I am okay with that. I have no question. Like, that's kind of how I see it. That, I guess I'm just sharing my point of view in less of a question and more sharing that I consider this me being informed of project changes and my opportunity to ask questions of administration of those changes.
Okay, Councillor or Deputy Mayor Montgomery, did you want to respond to Councillor Langmaid's question?
Thanks. So yeah, it was, and that's why it wasn't about just being notified. It was about coming back for reapproval of the funds. So it's not just enough to say, hey, we've redirected this, and some of these are already committed to. So it's not like we can say, hey, we don't really want to do that columbarium. Let's put that money in the bank. They potentially already signed contracts, and that's the whole point. It should be coming back to us, and saying, hey, we want to do a columbarium instead, and we'd go, yeah, okay, sure, great. Or like I said, we might want to say, no, let's hold off. But that should be it should be our prerogative to say, let's, we want to spend the money, we want to not spend the money. Because as I said, for capital money, it's literally our responsibility and purview. So, and that's what the policy was intended to communicate, was that it was for reapproval of the funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Langmaid? Did that help a bit?
I understand his point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to Councillor Wiley and then Councillor Peterson.
Hi, good evening. I don't want to weigh in on the debate because I don't know enough, but I just want to get clarification between two statements that seem to be contradicting to me. So I've got the budget policy in front of me, and it says that amendments to the capital budget that alters the scope of a project or that materially changes the appearance or functionality of the project shall be reviewed by and authorized by council. And then I've got what I thought I was hearing during this presentation is that we approve a budget for capital expenses. We, the council, approve a budget for capital expenses, and then the administration can redirect that capital how they see fit up to $200,000. Are those two statements contradictory, or I just don't know. I don't quite understand.
I don't believe they are contradictory. If we were going to do something significantly different than what was envisioned, we would bring it back to council. We are trying to accomplish many projects within the capital program, 40 or 50 or 60, whatever the number is in any particular year. And within the context of the total program and individual projects, sometimes projects cannot be completed, and sometimes projects need additional funding. Where they need additional funding, we need to supply funds to those projects. We look to projects that get canceled for that specific purpose. We don't, and on a practical basis, we can't necessarily come back to council to seek approval while those projects are going on. We can sometimes, and we try to keep council informed, but a lot of times it's just a matter of we need more money, but we can't go and borrow more. We don't have the reserves sometimes for the money to shore up a project. And so we find it within the scope of the whole game and shore that project up. It's more of a practical way of dealing with the number of projects that we're trying to get done and the money that we have available to do it. We're certainly not trying to take on new projects, and we're certainly not trying to change the scope. We're trying to work within the money that we have available at all times.
Mr. Legore, did you want to weigh in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if, for example, and this is all hypothetical, we had a $200,000 road project, say, or $195,000 road project, and it was canceled. And one of your departments came forward and said, we want to do a capital works project of $100,000 in Kinsman Park. I would not approve that based on this policy without talking to council, because it says there, capital budget amendments for a new program or service or a significant change in service level would require approving motion by council. That's a significant change in a service level if you're throwing that kind of money into a park. So we would come back and talk to council. Now, if there was a $195,000 road project that was canceled, and Ethan on Westridge project encountered the contaminated soils on that project and needed $150,000, I would say yes, go ahead and do it because that falls within this policy. And council will be notified when we bring our quarterly report forward. And that's how I interpret it. And I'm not going to speak for Mel, but I'm sure he would agree with me that that's how we would do it.
So I have a follow-up question. Is that all right? So I think we're all trying to say the same thing. Ultimately, maybe I don't want to overstate that, but we're just relying that we all have the common good for the town in mind. And if we say, take the example of the $7,000, I think you said dishwasher, and you turned it into a floor cleaner, you're saying that's still within scope because it's still cleaning the same facility in a slightly different way. And then Melissa, you're saying that we are being informed quarterly and that this would be an opportunity for us to go, well, that would be an example of something that council perceives as out of scope, and then moving forward, maybe we would look at those examples more specifically. Does that make sense? So I think what I'm saying is well done. I think we can rely on you guys and your prudence. And we just want to make sure that we are following this policy, which looks really good. And it looks like the work you guys are doing is good. But we as town councilors also have to be accountable to the public because we're the ones who get the nasty emails when things seem to go wrong. So that's my 2 cents. Any comments?
That sounds like a pretty good summary of where we're headed and what we operate under. I appreciate that. That is a good summary. I'll go now to Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would just like to put the motion on the floor that council accept the draft financial report to September 30th, 2021 as information.
Thank you. Now we have a motion on the floor. I should have taken a motion on the floor so we could have had all this discussion. Yeah, you should slam up against there more. Just before I go to you, Deputy Mayor, I just had a question. I think Mel, early on, you asked us if we wanted to ask a question about something specific. You mentioned the aquatic roof funds where some of that was diverted to the family center early on. I think you mentioned that. So did the aquatic center roof get done, or was there a savings and then it was applied to the family center roof? Thank you.
The aquatic center roof project was canceled. There was a significant increase in cost in budget for the family center roof, and that's where those funds were directed.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. So just with regards to this report, you know, we're talking about kind of changes of scope, and I don't want to confuse kind of, you know, increasing a budget to complete a project as envisioned. But when we talk about, you know, instead of getting a trackless sweeper, for instance, we're buying a columbarium. That's a huge change in scope. You know, it's not like we're buying a different color of equipment. We're buying like something that goes for a cemetery rather than, you know, sweeping things. So those are the things I'm talking about. Like that's to me registers as a substantial enough change of scope that you know, it's like at least it should be coming back at least for the new. You know, it's almost like anything that's not on the list at budget time. Maybe that'd be a more clear way to say it. Anything that's not on the list at budget time, you know, should come back to us before that purchase is made. You know, because like I said, it's. Some of these, and that's the ones I'm kind of highlighting, you know, is I understand projects go over budget. I'm not here to, you know, kind of, you know, complain about the projects. You know, actually you guys are under budget on a lot of things, and kudos to you for that. It's as I said, just in order for us to be accountable, and it's, yeah, any changes of scope of a project should be brought back to us. You know, with regards to the family center, so we increased the budget for that, you know, earlier this year, and so you're saying it's over that new budget as well now?
Through the chair, Councilor Montgomery, the two projects themselves, they exceeded when we initially budgeted for them through the municipal sustainability fund. Those funds, when they came back due to supply chain shortages and challenges, those costs got escalated. At this time, we decided we were able to, through the government of Alberta, we were able to reallocate the funds dedicated for the pool roof over to the family center roof, and then we requested additional funds through council as a backup in case a grant that we applied for would not be accepted, and so that's where those funds got redirected and for that purpose.
Okay, but my question is, so we got that initial estimate from, I think it was like Williams Engineering or something like that, but from that engineering company. It was a rough estimate, and then they came back and did a better estimate, and that's where the budget got increased. And so my question is, like, is it increased again beyond that? Or so we're still going with that one then?
Yeah, through the chair, our initial estimate was actually in November of 2019.
Yeah.
That's where we based those initial budgets on. When we went to go scope the work in April of 2020, COVID. Sorry, messing up my years here. That's when we discovered that there is increased construction costs, material shortages, and of that likes, and that's where we got a revised quote through Williams Engineering. That's the number we're locked in on, and assuming the weather continues, we should be successfully completing this project by the end of the year.
Great, thank you. What is the Municipal Fit Out Project? It was on the list for one of the ones where the funds were redirected.
Sorry, I didn't
It's
hear the
called,
question.
on the list, it's called the Municipal Fit Out Project. Let's see if I can find it.
Your worship, through the chair, that would be the fit out of the space for municipal enforcement.
Oh, I see, okay. Okay. And so I noticed we're spending some money to put like, you know, some sort of electrical meter in the sports center. And that's so I'm assuming we can, you know, figure out how much electricity the school is using versus the sports center. Who is, first of all, how is the electricity cost split now between the two organizations?
Through the chair, I'll have to confirm those numbers, but I believe it's 50% to the town, 32 the county, and 22 Golden Hills. The challenge we have in that facility is that there's only 1 meter for the entire building. This project is going to do an energy audit per se, as to determine, on every given day or given so, then this much electricity is used by the school and this much is used by the sports center. We're hoping that will provide us a better indication of the true cost, and then we can work with our partners on that to determine the proper allocation of the funding.
And if I could follow up on Deputy Mayor Montgomery's question, that same split as far as the percentages, that falls in line with the operations costs as well of the building?
Through the chair, it does. I think one of the challenges that we're facing with that building is when the initial joint use agreement was established, it set out funding criteria for all those sort of things, but things have evolved that weren't initially discussed, such as elevator maintenance or snow removal, and those things weren't addressed in the initial joint use agreement. So we've been working with Golden Hills in terms of trying to allocate certain percentages are town costs, certain percentages are shared costs, or certain percentages are Golden Hills costs. And this is the one last piece of the puzzle that we're still trying to determine and kind of get a best estimation on.
And as far as the new counselors are concerned, the split of how things are paid goes back to the original funding for that building. It was a $10 million building, and the town put in $5 million, and then the county put in $3 million, and the school division put in $2 million. So that's kind of been the way that we've arrived at the split costs of operations and things like this electrical panel, similar kind of thing as far as how we're going to cover things as far as operations and other things. Since there are three parties involved in this building, it was a unique project and it worked out really well, but that's how it all came to be. I'll come back to you, Deputy Mayor Montgomery, and we'll go to Mr. Legore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and that meters will save the town money in the long term, because currently they're asking for a 70-30 split where the town pays 70% of the cost of that entire facility, including the school. Just think about who uses the most electricity. So that project will have payback in the long term.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And with regards to the solar power that's generated there, like who, are we going to get a share of the solar power once the split is done?
Through the chair, Council Montgomery, that was an expense that was solely incurred by the Golden Hills.
Okay.
Council at that time also agreed that there would be no share in any revenue or any savings generated by that.
Okay, thank you. And one final question. Well, I guess it's kind of joined, but what work from the 2020 for the town hall are we paying for right now? It was on the list.
Sorry, I beg your...
Well, one of the things that was on the list was something for work from 2020 for the town hall that's being paid this year. I was just wondering what that was.
Your worship, through the chair, I can answer that one. That money primarily was the work done around the parking lot over by the farmer's market. There was electrical plugs put in that parking lot. There was grass put in this year to kind of finish off that area because it was never sodded. It's things like that weren't completed as part of the original project, but there was still money left to complete the things that needed to be done but weren't fit in the original budget. But when we had money that wasn't spent and there was money available, those projects were completed.
Okay, thank you. And we'll just one final question, thank you. How much is left in the town hall fund exactly? Okay, if you want to
We'll
come back
have
to
to
that answer.
determine it.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
We'll get back to council on that.
Okay, yeah, and thank you very much, administration. I appreciate your time, and council, I appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we do have a motion on the floor, and if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion? And that motion is carried. Thank you, Mel. Ethan, while you're here, can I just ask you a quick question? It has to do with the Westridge project, super easy. When we start landscaping next year, will the ditch between the Trans-Canada and Westridge Road be hydroseeded at all, or what's the plan for that?
Your worship, that definitely. The reason it wasn't done this year is there's probably some reshaping that needs to be done on that ditch in order to make sure that it drains properly. That part of the scope wasn't planned for this year, so we'll plan to do that next year, and then we'll seed it when we're done that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We'll move now to 8.5, Chief Administrative Officer Appointment, page 68. Kara, are you speaking to this?
Yes, thank you. So good evening, Your
Thank
Worship.
you, Lisa and Mel.
Sorry, good evening, Your Worship and members
Ethan.
of Council. So on November 23rd, you'll recall that Council unanimously approved the agreement for the Chief Administrative Officer. Mr. Kevin Scoble has accepted the offer, and we have announced his arrival in January. So one of the things that Council needs to do prior to Mr. Scoble starting is to officially appoint him as the Chief Administrative Officer. And so tonight we have a recommendation before you to appoint him as CAO effective January 10th, 2022. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Did you say January 10th?
One question, and I think it's for council. We should probably consider this. Oh, did you want to continue? I'm sorry, Councillor Wiley. I saw your light on still, and I thought I cut you off. My question is, we originally thought Mr. Scoble was going to be starting on January 1st, and we had agreed that Mr. Legore would stay on for 30 days after that. So do we need to discuss that as far as Mr. Legore would now stay with us until February 10th? He would still have that 30-day period, but Mr. Legore, comments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a side discussion that council should have separate from this motion.
Okay, thank you.
And
Sorry
I'm
about that.
I'm agreeable to that date, whatever council decides. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So is anyone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Wiley, sorry, that's what you were doing.
Denise is prompting me. I would happily move that council appoint Mr. Kevin Scoble as the town's Chief Administrative Officer in accordance with the Municipal Government Act effective January 10th, 2022.
Thank you for that motion. Are there any comments or discussion on it? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. That brings us to item 9, committee reports. And I think you've all received the reports in writing. So that brings us first to 9.1 Wheatland Housing Body Board meeting minutes on page 80. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, if I just might speak very briefly to those minutes, there's a couple things that council's had questions to put to them. The first thing is that there is some amendments to the new membership on the building committee. We're very, very pleased to have Mr. Keith Clayton representing Wheatland Hospice, who is a acting member of the Wheatland Housing Board, and of course very pleased that Councillor Wagner is representing the town on that board, and that building committee has now set up a very strategic plan. I know that Councillor Wagner will be talking about it more into the future, but I wanted to assure our community that in no way has the work towards a new lodge build abated. They are still very, very actively engaged in the process, and you didn't hear as much during the election, and I apologize for that. The second thing is that a motion came forward at our last meeting that all board members be vaccinated, and that did pass with a huge majority, and so we're moving forward on that and building policy around it, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Is someone prepared to put a motion on the floor? Thanks, Mark. Councillor Wegener.
I recommend that council accept the Wheatland Housing Body Board report as information.
Thank you for that motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. That brings us to 9.2, Wheatland and District Emergency Medical Services Association Board Report. Page 90. And does anyone on that board need to make any clarification or make any comments before? I guess we should put the motion on the floor anyway. if there's discussion. Councillor Peters.
I would move that we accept the Wademsa Association Board report as information.
Thank you. Now we have a motion on the floor. Is there discussion on that or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you, Council. And that brings us to 10 items directly related to Council. 10.1, the Restriction Exemption Program. And I believe Mark is with us tonight if there are questions basically for you. And you can just answer them from your spot if you'd like, Mark. Do we have any questions from councillors as far as the Restriction Exemption Program in our recreation or town facilities? Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. So I've got like a number of questions from people in the community about about the REP and about the application of it. And one question that I keep getting is with regards to what are considered out of scope activities. And you know, I was even forwarded a letter, and I passed it on to the rest of council from a lawyer that said that out of scope activities are you know, basically out of scope, and therefore like the REP or the province's, let's say, umbrella of that gives us, you know, kind of the ability to ask for you know, proof of vaccination does not like out of scope activities don't fall under that umbrella, and therefore we shouldn't be asking for proof of vaccination from anybody, whether it's, you know, like the youths involved or the coaches or the parents, et cetera. So I'm wondering if administration could perhaps just talk about that and clarify, I guess, what the position is. Thank you.
Through the chair, Councilor Montgomery, youth activities are considered out of scope, and those participants under 18 are not required to comply with any vaccine mandates or anything like that. Excuse me, there are a number of AHS supporting documents that outline and clearly state that adults, coaches, and individuals associated with those activities are considered in scope and must comply with the restriction exemption program.
Thank you. Where would people find that information? Like, is it on the Alberta government website, presumably? And if you could even like specifically mention, like, you know, something that people could search for on that'd be awesome.
Through the chair, I can circulate that through Ledge Services. There's a document through the AHS website, and I'm just trying to find it specifically where it states that coaches and people associated with that are required to participate in the program.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just checking my.
And Mark, while Deputy Mayor is just checking on that, other communities are following the same procedure we are. We're not an anomaly as far as Strathmore is concerned.
Your Worship, that's correct. Obviously, every community can choose to opt in and opt out. We have been participating in discussions with our neighbors, our surrounding municipalities, Calgary, Airdrie, et cetera, and all are implementing a rep in some variety at some of their facilities. Most are doing it at all their facilities. Those challenges that, you know, they're isolating some facilities that are non-rep, but then those facilities are obviously subject to different rules, such as no adult participation, no food or drink, or things like that. So there are changes, but again, majority are following with the restriction exemption program.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. So another question I have is like about the walking track. Is it possible to say designate the walking track as out of scope, or like that we don't have to ask for proof of vaccination for the walking track?
Through the chair, our conversations and with the local health inspector is, in order for it's all under one umbrella. We can't designate specific areas. We don't have access for, to prevent people from going up to the walking track. They can access that facility in a variety of ways. And so it has to be as the entire facility, no different than a basketball court or the turf. Just because it's a physical barrier, you just have to, that's how the facility is being structured. The one exception that could possibly be is the arena, because it has two separate, almost independent arenas. However, that does share the main entrances and exits and things like that. So what we had in the previous year is staggered entry times and things like that. And then it would also then change how we're booking in terms of dressing rooms and things like that. So it's very challenging in a facility like the, excuse me, it's extremely challenging, almost impossible in a facility like the field house where there's just ways to get into into various areas.
That makes sense. That Christmas market that we hosted, or we let go on, which facility was that in?
Through the chair, that was at the Civic Center. Those type of Christmas markets are viewed as out of scope. They're as retail, no different than Walmart or Sobeys and things like that. So even though the facility is designated as a restriction exemption program, the activity that was involved in it is out of scope, and that's why those restrictions weren't a requirement at that time.
Okay, and the fact that the pool it's a kind of, in part of the same facility, like that we were able to kind of, separate those two then?
It has a designated entrance, even though they share the same walkway. Obviously, there's a separate entrance for the pool as there was for the Civic Center.
Okay, and I'll let my fellow councilors ask some questions. I have a couple more, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Wiley first, and then Councillor Langmaid.
Hi. I think I speak for every person in this room. Like, we're sick of COVID. We're sick of the REP program. We're sick of checking for people's personal medical information when they enter buildings. Like, it's just, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of infringing on people's rights. And I understand that Section 1 of the Charter says that, in a free and democratic society, there are times we can do that. But I think we're all just sick of it. So my first comment is thank you for everyone for continuing to keep each other accountable for this and continuing to ask hard questions and continuing to discuss this. My question is this, though. Is the town administration carefully monitoring the latest science, the latest information, the latest news story to determine that if it is no longer in our best interest to continue to check for people's personal medical information? So what I mean, for example, is this new variant Omicron. Look, it doesn't even seem to affect, the vaccine doesn't even seem to affect it. So it just, as more information on this, for example, comes out and then we're realizing, oh my goodness, the vaccine doesn't even work for it. Or for another example, we realize that after 5 months, the vaccine is no longer so effective. So at some point, is the town carefully monitoring this to decide that there's a point that we could just get out of this REP program or opt out of this REP program because we think that it's no longer effective? Is there an end date in near?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do monitor and we follow closely with Alberta Health Services, and Mark closely works with our other communities in the area. Airdrie, Okotoks, High River, etc., as to what they're doing. And basically, everyone is administering the program the same way. And I agree totally with Councillor Wiley's comments. Everyone's fed up with this. But we have to continue to do the best we can to protect our community and our young people in this community. And as recently as today, the CEO of Pfizer was on there saying that he is confident that their vaccine will protect everyone against this latest variant. So you're continually getting different messages, and we have to juggle that. The thing that I strive to do is protect our staff. Our staff have been subject to so much abuse at this facility from public. It's tremendous. That's why we have security there to try and protect staff And that's why other communities are doing it as well. And I commend Mark for the work that he's done. This has been a real struggle for him. He's new in the position. He's getting pressured by everyone, people in the community, senior management like myself. Council has questions, public has questions, user groups have questions. Everyone's throwing comments at him. I stand behind him 100% in the way he's administering REP, and I will continue to do so. I know it's a struggle for our community, but we're just trying to do the best for everyone. And we've met with people and we've talked to them, and most people understand it when you explain it to them and go through the whole thing. Mark, you can add anything to it that you want. Thank you.
Through the chair, there's, I think CEO Legore has echoed those sort of comments that we maintain positive working relationships with those municipalities to determine how they're interpreting the guidelines and the restrictions. We participate on a regular basis. We have ongoing dialogue with our local health inspector to ensure that we are also interpreting the rules. They change on almost on a weekly basis or on a daily basis, depending. The QR code scanner app has recently been updated, so we're working with that. So I think obviously we're doing our best to try to maintain everything is changing, but in compliance with the AHS and what the province has outlined, we feel that this is the best interest for our community and that it allows everybody to maintain access and accessibility to our facilities.
Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd like to echo the comments made by our CAO saying thank you for your attention to this file. And I can absolutely appreciate that this has been a difficult undertaking. I can feel that. It's been a rough couple days for myself as well. So just I want to echo thank you for taking this on. And the question I have for you today, Mark, is it's my understanding that we opt in to the REP program. We don't have to implement the REP program. Could you please help not only council but members of the public understand what access to our facilities would look like if we chose to not implement the REP program? How would that affect public access and to those services?
Through the chair, Councilor Langmaid, yes, we have two options in order to run those REC facilities, opt in or opt out, as you indicated. The restriction exemption program enables the entire community to participate and access those facilities. If we chose to not follow the REP, there'd be restrictions in terms of capacity. We'd be down to 1/3 capacity. Members of adults would be unable to utilize the facilities. They would have to have a private booking in order to access the swimming pool or things like that. If you wanted to swim with your family as an adult, you'd have to rent the entire facility. You wouldn't be able to access it with the general public. Food and drink services would be limited, almost not available, no different than a restaurant. If they choose not to follow the REP programs, they're unable to open for dine-in services and things like that. So the biggest one, and I think why most of the municipalities have chosen to follow the restriction exemption program, is that it maintains access to the entire community. Those who are vaccinated or those who choose not to, but are willing to take a test and show that.
Thank you. And if I could ask a quick follow-up question. It's my understanding that events like farmers markets and like the Christmas market that we successfully ran this weekend, and it was well attended. I was there. It was lovely. It's my understanding that they are now, it is now an option for those events to take place in the restrictions exemption program. Are there any upcoming events in town that may be affected by this, and will administration be working with the organizers of those events to ensure that they either implement the REP or choose not to implement it, or what's that process looking like? I'm supposing is the question. Thank you.
Through the chair, Councilor Langmaid, it's my understanding, yes, I believe that change has just come down. I'm not exactly 100% sure in terms of, I haven't seen it officially, but in terms of any future events. We haven't anything scheduled right now on the books, and if something is coming down the pipe, then we obviously work with those organizers, whether it's ourselves or our partners, and to ensure that we're in compliance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And my question comes from a different area, Mark. And again, you and I have had a little session where we kind of supported each other because we've both been at the front of a lot of the negative, nasty stuff. My question is, how is compliance going at some of our recreation facilities? And I'm still kind of hearing that there's a small minority, a few people who are still disobeying or not following the REP program. Are we dealing with people like that, or where are we at that kind of thing?
Your Worship, on a weekly basis, I check in with all the 3 facilities, well, really the 4 with the Civic Center. It seems like compliance is starting to become more and more the norm. We haven't had any significant issues for the last couple of weeks since since the QR code scanners have come out. Minor tweaks in terms of, like I said, the app being updated recently and things like that. I think we always going to have those outliers that have expressed their concerns with the program and how it's running, or why we're doing that. But I think that's no different than the general public in any variety. I think there's 90% compliance, and like as I indicated before, we haven't had any significant issues. One of the changes that we're trying to do, especially at the arena, is to have some positive reinforcement, especially when it comes to mask wearing. If any of our staff see a child who's wearing a mask, we present them with a little voucher that supplies them with a free drink from the concession. This is instead of the heavy-handed approach of trying to dictate this, we're trying a positive aspect. So that so far has been well received, or the comments I have seen has been well received.
Thank you, Mark. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. To be honest, I'm very bothered by the idea that that our staff, or even you, Mark, I can't even imagine, the trouble that you've had to go to and that you've had to bear, and it's for, like, I guess, this is why I raised this idea. Like, if you look at a community like Drayton Valley, what they did was they didn't implement the REP, but they basically let groups kind of implement it themselves, and I'm wondering, I guess if you could maybe talk about, why we're not doing something like that, that'd be great. Thank you.
I can't comment as to Drayton Valley as to why they're doing it, why they're choosing to implement the REP or not. For us, it all came back down to access to the facility. Activities such as senior size or aqua size that involve majority of either seniors or adults, those programs would not be able to run in a non-REP facility.
What I'm referring to is that I believe so in Drayton Valley, for instance, like let's say there's a group of adults who want to play hockey. They would get the space to play, and then they would be responsible for ensuring that people were complying with the REP. They would be responsible for checking for vaccination status, et cetera. And I guess, this will kind of tie to another question I asked about what we're spending for security for our facilities. It seems to me that if we put the groups in charge, it takes it doesn't put our staff, in under the gun, basically. They're not having to kind of police people. We're not having to spend money on security. It's up to the group. And basically, I believe the way Drayton Valley is doing it is the groups have to indemnify the town or the community. And so then it's their legal responsibility. If they, if an inspector walks in and checks and, there's an adult or whatever that doesn't have vaccination, then it's that group that gets the fine. And so I understand where we are right now. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
If I could offer something, my personal physician did his residency in Drayton Valley, and on my last medical appointment, he told me that they were one of the lowest percentage of vaccinated in the province, and that they have 5 times the positivity rate of COVID than we do in Strathmore. So, you know, I think the REP program is one piece of the puzzle as far as getting us through this once and for all. And some of these places that have chosen to do their own, I personally think that if we had a minor hockey trying to enforce it or trying to apply some sort of, so that we weren't doing it as a town, I guess, there would be a lot of non-compliance, and there would be a lot of pressure on people who basically volunteered to be in a minor hockey board, and suddenly they've got to be policing or checking on people's vaccination or limiting numbers if you're going to go with the 30% capacity. So, you know, I just think that if we're following what other communities are doing in general around our area, and our numbers are, I think the last time I looked, we had 24 positive cases fairly recently. It's really, really important that we get through this, and unfortunately, we've had to do some of these things as other communities have had to, and unfortunately, it's something that none of us had signed on for at all, and we're just doing our best. Did you have another question or comment, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, like I don't know anything about, like, you know, I guess the medical situation in Drayton Valley. I've just been passed along, you know, information about how that community decided to implement this. And so, as I said, my concern is about the staff, you know, and the cost. And so my question is, how much are we spending on security for our facilities, and how much are we budgeting, I guess, for the upcoming year for security for facilities? Thank you.
Through the chair, Council Montgomery, the only facility that is utilizing any external security is the arena. There's been a significant compliance at the pool and at the sports center, so we haven't merited those type of costs at those facilities, and that echoes a lot of what our other municipalities have, Okotoks, Airdrie, et cetera. They're not requiring it, depending on their facility. Genesis Place, for example, in Airdrie is one, you have to get in only one entrance, and so they're doing it for all their activities. Those costs right now are around between $5,000 and $6,000 per month right now for our security costs for, you know, like I said, you know, 30 days a month coverage starting at 4 o'clock. But we're budgeting that towards our COVID recovery, our COVID expenditures. And in my understanding, speaking with the finance department, there's significant budget still within that pot that's allowing for this.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to start, I guess this is more a comment to the people watching at home. I know how upset people are. I want to say that it's never okay to fall into harassment of employees or volunteers. It's never okay to utter threats or to intimidate people. But for those people who are not doing those things, we do hear you. Like, we understand how frustrating this is. This isn't easy for any of us. So my question is I just want to repeat what I think I've heard you say, Mark. So our hands seem tied from the province. Either we're limiting access to adults who want to receive group instruction, or we're forbidding access to people who choose not to reveal their private medical information. So either way, we are limiting or forbidding access to one group or another. And it just seems to me like we've tried to do our best to make a decision that it was a tough one. Do you have any comments on that?
Through the chair, I do not have any comments to echo on that. Sorry.
Councillor Langmaid.
Sorry, I'd just like to clarify something for myself, from my understanding. Through the REP program, someone who wishes to keep their personal health information to themselves can still access that facility by showing proof of a negative test within 72 hours, if they so wish to keep their vaccination status private.
Through the chair, that is correct. A negative test, an exemption, a medical exemption, or a positive or an approved QR code scan. Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
I just want to, on behalf of myself and lots of the people in the community, thank you for what you've accomplished and what you've been able to do. I spend a great portion of my spare time in arenas and sports facilities, and Strathmore is a standout, both in terms of how the public has responded so respectfully in large numbers, and both in the way that the people who have been hired for that one facility have comported themselves. I was there and I saw a person hired by us face abuse, physical abuse and verbal abuse. I saw someone acting very, very badly in the presence of many, many young children. The last thing I would ever want to see is people from those sports organizations having to face that. My job as a counselor, my primary job as a counselor, is to ensure the safety of community. And that's why I want to thank this administration, because I think that you have done an extraordinary job of ensuring that I can meet that piece of my accountability in keeping this community safe from many, many of the aspects that we're facing. And as my fellow councillors have said, this is an incredibly challenging and difficult time, and sometimes there just is no 100% solution, and this is one of them. And but I do believe that the majority of the community who want to participate, and their children's mental health is so critical, they're able to participate. The grandparents and parents and siblings are allowed to go watch them. I think that you have come up with an admirable solution, and as Councillor Langmaid pointed out, you haven't been exclusionary, and I'm really grateful for what you've accomplished.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Wegener.
Thank you. I echo some of Denise's comments. I'm at the arena pretty much every weekend. I volunteer with the Wheatland Kings there. Not following the rep program, restricting it to 1/3 capacity would impact the team financially. But you did mention that exemptions, medical exemptions are allowed. Now, with the security people at the front, if somebody has a medical exemption, are they required to show some form of proof of that?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor Wagner. There is documentation that that's required through the AHS website, and we've shared that with all our user groups so that if someone was to download and fill out the form through their physician, then that was an acceptable form and would be acknowledged and be able to grant them access.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess the next thing is when I'm at the arena, I do see a lot of people not wearing masks. Medical exemption or not, I don't know, but and I know it's probably a tough thing to enforce, but is there any plan on enforcing the non-use of masks?
Through the chair, it's our intention, and we've always tried to enforce the use of masks for all individuals. Participants, once they step on the ice, aren't required. As I indicated before, we're trying to use a new approach of trying to use a positive reinforcement with individuals of any age that would entitle them to, if they're wearing their masks, that they could be utilized get a free pop from the concession. We're working with those user groups to ensure that their coaches are wearing masks, and we have regular meetings and conversations with them just to ensure that they're compliant. Unfortunately, sometimes people, once they get into dressing rooms and into the stands, sometimes remove them. But, obviously our goal is to try to educate them at the front and hopefully that they're in compliance somewhere else. But again, it's our intention that it is 100% compliance.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, what I see is I actually see the younger kids being more compliant than a lot of the adults there.
Thank you, Councillor Wegner, and thank you, Mark, again for your responses and all the efforts you've done in this long time period. That brings us to bylaws, 11.1 business licensing bylaw number 21-20. And this is in our package, so I'm sure a lot of you have gone through this. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Deputy Mayor Montgomery for bringing this concept of tiered business licenses to us as a community. I think it's a really good thing, and it's timely as far as the economy and the way that businesses have struggled through it. Good evening, Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you, Council, for giving us some time to this bylaw tonight. And this bylaw is actually, it's a collaborative project that was through Economic Development, Planning and Development, and Finance. So I just really wanted to thank Mel and Lisa and Chuck for their help to Kristen and I on this. This came to Council for first reading this past July. And thank you, Mayor, as you said, that this is a project that started at Council's direction last January. We also took it as an opportunity to correct some of the stale dating that had occurred in the existing bylaw. It hadn't been updated since 2013, at which point fees also hadn't changed since 2013 at least. We also want to include some of the council strategic priorities, such as youth entrepreneurship, recognizing long-standing businesses, and recognizing the special relationship that the town has with Siksika and Wheatland County. We reviewed 30 communities, and I really believe that what we've put forward here is a bylaw that fulfills the original goal of a tiered business license fee structure, but it also provides a thorough update of the bylaw itself. We've asked for 3 recommendations to Council for second reading and third reading, but then I also want to draw your attention to the third recommendation there, and that's that when we redid the bylaw here, what we've also done is we've streamlined the approach to how the town funds the chamber. In past years, historically, the fees, the business license fees that chamber members pay to the town are aggregated into one grant and then reimbursed to the chamber. That totals somewhere around $3,000. So what we would like to do is increase that to $10,000. That's based off of the same strategy that we put forward in the budget for our own event strategy. The chamber, in many other communities, a chamber is responsible for home and garden shows and several other different community type events that are economic drivers. The town doesn't have enough event staff to put all those events on. And I don't think that would actually provide the right return on investment. Investing in full-time staff to throw economic development events, I don't think it aligns with Council's goals for our budget. So by increasing the amount of funding that we provide to the chamber and tying it to a fee-for-service agreement that we would negotiate with the chamber, we can increase the number of events in the community, increase the amount of economic activity, but in a really cost-effective way for the town as well. So that's the third recommendation that we put in there, and it's part of the whole package that we put together. So I hope that you're as impressed by the bylaws as I am. I'm very, very proud of this, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions first for Jeff? Do you want to put it on the floor? Well, we can have questions first, and then once we put it. Would you like to put a motion on the floor?
Yes, Your Worship.
Wow.
I would move that Council give second reading to bylaw number 21-20, being the business licensing bylaw.
Thank you for that motion. And now that we have a motion on the floor, discussion, Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. Actually, I have an amendment that I'd like to offer, so I guess I'll make the motion and then I'll speak to it. I would like to move that Council direct administration to amend the bylaw, so I guess I have a question for administration. So when I kind of initially brought this forward, part of the impetus for it was to reduce the fees that some home businesses are paying below the $100. So what I'm wondering is do I make an amendment to the bylaw itself to do that, or would it be the fees that we need to amend?
I have a thought. I was going to do the same thing, Jason. I wondered if what we could do, and this is the same question, is give this bylaw the second, third reading, approve it, and then plan to bring a motion forward in the new year to include, are you referring to micro home businesses?
Like just any home based business, basically.
So to almost increase the tiering so that there is even a lesser tier for what I've heard described as micro businesses that are out home occupation.
Yeah.
So my plan tonight was to just approve this bylaw as it is. It's very good, and then to bring a motion forward to include that tiering at a future date.
So just for my clarification, Councillor Wiley, go through all the readings, approve this, but in the new year, bring forward an amending motion?
That was my plan for tonight, but I'm still curious about the answer to Jason's question. Is it more prudent to amend it tonight?
Mr. Legore or Kara?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that certainly is an option. I don't know, I've not been privileged to the feedback that council's received on home occupation. Some communities will put a home occupation license fee substantially higher because some of them are generating big revenue working out of their home, and the idea is to try and force them into some of your downtown core, your vacant office spaces to run their business, because they're making as much or more than some of the small businesses that are operating in downtown. And if you look at Strathmore, there's a good example. Some of our small businesses downtown struggle. There's home occupations businesses, I'll tell you, that don't have the overhead that they have and are taking in more revenue than what they are. So you need to be sensitive what you're trying to do with home occupations. I appreciate where you're coming from, but I don't think what Councillor Wiley is suggesting is a bad idea. Or maybe instruct, after you pass this bylaw tonight, even instruct administration to do more research on micro home occupations or something and report back to council. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Legore. Mr. Wiley, did you have a follow-up comment? Councillor Wiley, sorry.
Yeah, so mine's paralleling Jason's. That was all I was going to do, is look into, I wasn't going to call it home occupation because I think that's a different thing. I've heard it described as home occupation micro businesses. And I don't think it would be simple to put a cap on it, like if you make, say, over $20,000 a year, because then you're getting into taxes and proof of stuff like that. But I think in the same way you say, you know, the Tupperware person isn't paying, I'm wondering if there's a way admin could further research this and see what other towns are doing with these micro businesses.
Okay.
Jeff?
Oh, sorry. Well, I was just going to say, yeah. So I'm gonna withdraw my my attempt to make an amendment. And I just want to say, Jeff, you know, like, great job to you and everybody else that worked on this. You guys took this idea and, you know, you ran with it, and I think it's great. And I see a lot of great stuff with it, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Person, I just want to clarify, I can't find in the new version of the bylaw the section about youth entrepreneurship and business licenses for youth.
Let's go there.
I've looked a few times and I just can't find it, and I see it's actually blacked out in the black line version provided in my agenda. So I just want to make sure that the intention was for that to remain in the bylaw, and that it's still there.
Yeah.
It is
Under 4
possible I am
months.
blind.
So in the bylaw, sorry, through the chair, in the bylaw, it's 1106. So, 1105, where a resident business is owned and operated by a person 25 years of age or under, the business license fee shall be waived. It's still important that businesses are licensed, but we waive the fee. So that's how we're encouraging the youth entrepreneurship there.
Beautiful, thank you very much. I squinted at that and misread it as 25 years or longer, and thank you for clarifying that.
We actually camouflaged it because 1106 is then a business that's been in operation for 25 years or longer, has theirs waived. So it's a way of, yes, we're encouraging youth entrepreneurship, but then if, like when a business succeeds and succeeds for 25 years and has renewed its business license fee all that time, we want to reward that. So this is one of the things that's an original made in Strathmore thing. We didn't see this anywhere else in the province or in our scans, and this is something that we think is like a really good thing to reward in our business community.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. I'm excited to see that still in there, and I'm glad I'm just blind.
Thank you, Councillor Langmaid. Councillor Peterson and Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things that we talked about 2 terms ago was doing what Councillor Wiley is talking about in terms of encouraging processes for micro businesses, and then subsequent to what our CAO just said about trying to bring those businesses into the downtown. And when we were doing that research, we found 132 arts-based businesses in the community, most of them unlicensed. And so we were, and not many of them making any kind of money, but making some. And so we were thinking, you know, how could we enhance a place like the Strathmore Centre, or the old co-op building, to bring in sort of those micro businesses into workspaces, you know, that would benefit so many people. And tying that into your concept around the chamber, I think is just a brilliant, brilliant thing. So I really love this bylaw, except for the portion, and it's not that I don't like it, but I have a discomfort with the costs to our neighbors, to Siksika and County of Wheatland. And I see that they're lower, and I understand that they're lower, but I'm not sure that it's very neighborly to do that in the sense that we're still charging them more than what we charge our own people. And in my concept of community, they are our people. They're us, and they're one with us. And so when I look at that, I guess in the same way that we no longer charge the County of Wheatland additional money to attend our arenas or go to our sports spaces, and in doing that, we came to a tripartite agreement with the new sports center, you know, for that. And we weren't making very much money, but we gained tremendous capacity by not doing it, and by entering into a fullness of community. So if I were to make an amendment, it would be that. It would be to charge that. But I would also like to hear the input from my fellow councillors, because there might be things that I'm missing in this, and if there is a residual damage to this town, I wouldn't want to see that either. My feeling is that there would be advantages, but I'm not certain of that. So
Is that a motion that you're making?
it's not. I'm not making a motion because I'm not certain enough, and I'm willing to wait, as Councillor Wiley is, for some you know, other wisdoms coming forward in that regard, and I'd like to hear Mr. Person's views on this, and I have no certainty around my idea or my thoughts around it. It's just a feeling, and it's not based in any kind of evidence-based understanding.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Thank you very much, Councillor. It was really interesting in this when we did the breakdown on where business licenses, you know, like where they originate. Strathmore, like about half of our businesses are licensed or are resident businesses, and about half are non-resident businesses. And of those non-resident businesses, off the top of my head, I recall about 200 being based in the county or in Siksika. So if we dropped the fee to equivalent to ours, that would be about a $20,000 impact on the budget. But that said, you know, so like the model that we used, so actually this is another unique Made in Strathmore thing, in that there are other municipalities that will provide a discounted rate to a county or like to an adjoining municipality. We didn't see any that offer any kind of a discount to an adjoining Indigenous community. So like that was something that we put in based off of the work that you've done with Siksika in the past couple of terms. Spruce Grove has one other like a sort of a flip side where their base fee, there's a $50 addition for neighboring municipalities rather than a complete jump up to the non-resident fee. So like there's certainly room to do like more of a discount. I don't know that I would encourage you to go like to parity, but I think that we can do a more pronounced step, certainly.
Thank you. So we still have motion for second reading. Deputy Mayor Montgomery?
Thank you. And yeah, I think that's a good idea, actually. And I was going to ask with regards to that preferential pricing, do you know if Siksika or the county gives Strathmore preferential pricing at all?
Through the chair, the county actually doesn't have business license fees. They charge development fees, but there's no business license fees. Siksika, I'm actually not sure of.
And so I have a question about this section 1106. When I initially read that, I was thinking like it's like after 25 years you get your 1 year waived, but is it actually you get like the rest of, it's just waived in perpetuity for that person?
Through the chair, so that's something that we would leave at council's discretion. So after 25 years, they apply for a waiver. And at that point, council can make the decision, yes, we're going to waive these in perpetuity for this business, as long as it's the same owner, or you can waive it on a year-by-year basis.
I see, okay.
It's one of those things, like I said, like it hasn't been implemented anywhere, so we left it intentionally a little bit vague there, so that, like as that process comes up, we can actually grow that policy organically.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that's all my questions. So, sorry. Oh, where are market participants, such as farmers market sellers, covered by this? Because I noticed that, for instance, like if somebody is selling on public property, like some sort of like a market of some sort, they have to get written permission from the CAO. So I'm just wondering, like that can't be the same for if you want to set up in the farmers market or something like that.
Through the chair. So if you go to page 102 of your packages, it's section 4P. Sorry, P is in Peter. So that is one of the classifications where a business is exempted from obtaining a business license. It says that a farmer's market, flea market, or garage sale in continuous operation for a period not exceeding 7 days. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and so you're saying like any participant in the market is covered by that. Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would move an amendment to the bylaw, if I might. And I would move referencing page 113 of 167 of the bylaw under non-residential based on Siksika Reserve or Wheatland County. And I would change, I would move to amend the amounts in 2022 from $200 to $150, in 2023 from $200 to $150, and from 2024 from $225 to $175. $150, and $175.
So is there discussion on the amendment then?
Well, I have two questions. So procedurally, does that affect us doing second and third reading then tonight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it does not. Amendment is in order. And then you give the second reading as amended, and then you can proceed to third reading.
Okay, thank you. And my second question then is, so I'm new around here. Clearly, I want to be neighborly with Wheatland County and Siksika Reserve. But I think I've been elected to represent the community of Strathmore. And so I'm kind of at a crossroads here, because it sounds to me like Jeff's saying that that would mean then a $10,000 hit if it's half of the 20 you had referred to. So then are the taxpayers of Strathmore subsidizing our neighborliness?
Can I respond, Your Worship?
Sure.
So I think you make a really valid point. But the other side of that is that when I say that we are all the same people, I have a hard time charging them anything more than what we are paying. Because without the 7,000 to 8,000 people who live in the county of Wheatland, this would be a much different community in terms of what they purchase, what they buy, what they contribute economically to this community. We contribute very little on the other side of that in terms of their economic development. In terms of Siksika, our mayor has referenced this in the past. Former councillor Herman Yellow Woman brought forward an actuarial piece of information to us in 2017 that talked about how much, do you remember the amount, how many millions? How much?
Percent of our economy.
Yeah, it was somewhere in the area of $13 million over a period of time, over a period, I think, of 3 years. But anyway, 7,000 members of the Siksika could also contribute a significant amount to our economy, and we contribute nothing to theirs, nothing. And so my preference would be to put this in a very different spot. I think that I hear what Mr. Person is saying, and I understand too that in that initial $20,000, that some of that money is going to go to the Chamber of Commerce, and I am mindful of the fact that our Chamber of Commerce is Strathmore and the county of Wheatland. And so I know that taking it right down to the place that our residential tax business licensing fees isn't necessarily reasonable, and that the money going to the chamber will benefit both our Siksika neighbors and our Wheatland County neighbors. So that's my justification in that process.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment to the motion?
Or Jeff, did you also have a response?
Oh, did you want to? Okay. Sorry, Jeff.
My only discussion is just that I'm not going to support the amendment, but I'm actually going to support the spirit of the amendment in that I'm not sure the process of doing this, but I would instead look at a way of doing it where the surrounding area was maybe $200 for next year and then incrementally went down to get us to the point that Denise is suggesting. And that's why I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you for that clarification. So I'll call the question. All in favor of the amendment to the motion? And opposed? And the amendment has carried. So now we have to have a new motion. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. So would you mind reading that again then? And put your mic on.
It's just now we're voting on the original motion as amended.
Right, but
That
you
is
have to
correct.
state that in words, do you not?
The motion is already on the floor, the original motion, so now it's just as amended.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll call that question. All in favor of the amended motion? And opposed? And that motion is carried. Now I'm looking for a motion for third reading. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council give third reading to bylaw number 21-20 being the business licensing bylaw.
The second part?
And that council direct administration to incorporate the changes in fees into the fees bylaw and return with that bylaw to the December 15th, 2021 council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Oh, I think there's a third part to that?
There's just another motion.
Okay.
Your Worship, you're okay if I move the motion? I would move that council direct administration to prepare a proposed fee-for-service arrangement with the Strathmore Wheatland Chamber of Commerce and to return to council with this proposal for review and approval at a future meeting.
Thank you. You've all heard the question and the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you, Jeff, for all your work and your
So,
staff.
This is a procedural question. At what point would I have to wait till a future date to direct admin to look into this home occupation micro business?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that motion would be in order at this time. It relates to the topic that's on the table.
Okay, so I will make a motion that administration look into in tiering home occupation micro businesses and just come back with a report as to what that would look like and what that would cost. And perfect.
Thank you for that.
Early in the new year.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. That brings us to 11.2, Council Procedural Bylaw number 21-29, which is on page 134. And Kara, you're speaking to this one?
Jonathan will be joining us via Zoom as well. He's a little under the weather. So I can speak to it kind of holistically. The recommendation that's before you tonight is to actually refer this bylaw to Committee of the Whole. You will recall that when we had our training session with Mr. Ali Mina, there was some feedback and some discussion that went as part of that conversation. And so at this time, we are recommending that council refer it to Committee of the Whole, and then that way we can have that deeper conversation and answer any specific questions and get that feedback, the council, on changes the council wants to see.
So at this point, I would be encouraging questions, and if anyone wants discussion on this, we would have to put a motion on the floor first. Is that correct, Kara, just for procedure? Any questions for Kara or Mr. Legore? Deputy Mayor Montgomery?
Yeah, I just have a motion ready, so. I'll move the council direct administration to bring the council procedure bylaw number 21-29 to a committee of the whole meeting in early 2022.
And now that we have a motion on the floor, is there any discussion on that motion? Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you, Your Worship. The procedure bylaw is critical to how we function as a council, and I absolutely support us having a larger and more fulsome conversation on it. I think that's absolutely imperative, and that's why my question today is, what does early 2022 look like? Because for myself, I believe that this is imperative that we undertake as quickly as possible to ensure that we function effectively as a council and that we are all on the same playbook.
Thank you so much for the question. So through the chair, when we say early 2022, there's a couple of things that we'd like to consider. So first of all, we would like the new CAO, Mr. Scoble, to be in attendance because we do think that he's bringing, a different perspective and different experience, and we really want to make sure that he has an opportunity to weigh in as well. And then the other piece is that we will be bringing forward Council's Code of Conduct in the December 15th meeting just for a review, and we will be asking Council actually at that time to refer that bylaw as well to a Committee of the Whole. So our plan is to actually ask Council to schedule a Committee of the Whole in January to review both bylaws. And so just to have it really focused on Council's bylaws and have a deeper conversation on both of those bylaws.
Question for clarification.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. So we would take one entire meeting and we would dedicate it to this. Thank you. And I'm with Councillor Langmaid. The sooner we get this on the table, the better.
Councillor Wiley.
Mine is just so I can prepare. I think in a previous meeting, you had told us that one of the things that was probably going to be removed is the council's ability to do administration inquiries. I'm just wondering where that is in the bylaw so I can read it for myself and kind of get a better understanding of that. And just to give you a heads up, I'm going to be asking about that because I just want to know about the pros and cons.
No, absolutely, and so I'll look to John too to weigh in as well. So you won't find administrative inquiries in this new bylaw. That was under the past bylaw. So the proposed bylaw before you doesn't capture administrative inquiries. The reason that we've taken them out is a couple reasons. In terms of alignment with best practice, it's not considered best practice. So when I say that, we've looked at High Rivers bylaws, we've looked at Airdrie, we've looked at the City of Calgary, Edmonton, right? Like we're talking like a whole broad spectrum in terms of bylaws. That's not in alignment with best practice. The other thing that I want to be mindful of for council is that every time you submit an admin inquiry, then there's a delay in getting that information, right? So then you have to wait for another meeting to come back, and sometimes it's not that meeting, it might be 2 meetings, right? So some of those more simple questions of our request for information should simply be able to just go to your CAO and have him facilitate getting that information back to council. There's nothing to prohibit council in this proposed bylaw from putting an item on the agenda. So if there's something that you want to, bring forward and have a conversation in a public session, there's nothing that prevents you from doing that. So I think it kind of balances maybe both, and that was the intent and the spirit behind it. And John, do you have anything you'd like to add on that front?
Yeah, thank you, Worship Council. Yeah, I think we were just looking for just efficiencies. And the other thing too is that if we did get a large admin inquiry, that could take up a lot of staff resources and municipal resources. So if instead of having one councillor direct that admin inquiry, we would want all of council to direct it. So that's a good item that might come to account, be added to an agenda. Council can then direct administration to look into X, and then we can then go from there. So we're just looking for efficiencies and just kind of streamlining processes.
Mr. Legore?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a good example is Councillor Montgomery was sending emails regarding the REP. And he said, if I don't get the answers I'm looking for, I'm going to have to file administrative inquiry. Well, we don't want to put him through that process and delay it. We put it on the agenda for this meeting here tonight so we can answer your questions. And I think that's much more efficient. And that's really what Kara and Jonathan are saying, is that we're trying to make it more efficient. And if I could just add one other thing, sorry, Councillor Wiley, to hold you up with your question. If council would forward any inquiries, questions, comments, recommendations on the bylaw to us in advance, it would help us be prepared for when we have the committee of the whole, and that would greatly be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley?
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say that the administrative inquiries has already been taken out already. Okay. So I love efficiencies. I just wouldn't want council, a democratically elected council, to lose any ability to, I'll use the word inquire from the administration, whether or not we call it an admin inquiry. So what I'm understanding you saying is, from your opinion, council hasn't had any power taken away from it. It's just been redirected in a way that's more efficient?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion to direct administration to bring this bylaw to us? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Item 12, we have no urgent business. Item 13, questions between councillors and/or council statements. Anything from councillors? Deputy, almost took the title from you. Councillor Peterson?
I just have a very brief statement, Your Worship. Just for people watching at home, there is an initiative in the community for making Christmas stockings for seniors that has been spearheaded by local resident Marlene Risden, and they now have more than 600. And so if you know of people, please forward that message to her at the store, the Rack on 3rd. And so it's a really successful program and gaining good ground and shows lots of community support. And I'm very, very grateful to see all the buy-in from community. Much appreciated.
Thank you. And that brings us to 14, administrative inquiries. 14.1, safe transportation for town residents in RCMP. And I believe you have the response there. Deputy Mayor Montgomery?
Yeah, I just thank you very much for this answering this question. So I just want to clarify, I guess. So if somebody is released in inclement weather and they're from the town, then the RCMP will provide a ride to them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the staff sergeant has assured us that no one will be released and into inclement weather if they don't have a ride home. They will be given a ride home by the RCMP.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because I thought we had said before that RCMP wasn't allowed to for liability reasons.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We did not have the same view of this service previously. And with our new staff sergeant, he said, we don't need an agreement or any type of policy in place. They will give residents a ride home if they need a ride home.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Legore. That brings us to an item in camera, and we're looking for a motion to go in camera on 15.1. Councillor Wegener.
I move that council move in camera to discuss an item pertaining to FOIP 24-1A.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried, and we're going in camera at 9:02. Thank you, everyone.